When a crime lord falls for his broken assistant, love becomes the most dangerous weapon of all. Adrian Varelli ruled his empire with ice in his veins, until one question made his new assistant confess a nightmare she'd buried deep. That moment should have been nothing, just information, just another damaged person in his world of damaged people. But something cracked inside him, something he didn't know could break. And when Lena Cruz looked at him with those eyes that had seen too much, Adrian Varelli made a choice that would destroy everything he'd built, or remake it entirely. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The scar on Adrian Varelli's left hand was almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. Lena Cruz knew to look for everything. That was how you survived in places like this, by noticing which man's jacket bulged on the wrong side, which hallway went quiet before someone screamed, which doors you never, ever opened. She'd been working for Adrian for 3 weeks, 21 days of keeping her head down, her mouth shut, and her files organized. 21 days of pretending she didn't see the blood on his cufflinks some mornings, didn't hear the muffled sounds from the basement levels, didn't recognize the faces in his office as men whose disappearances made the news. Her desk sat outside his office, a sleek thing of black walnut and chrome that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. The building itself was legitimate on paper. Varelli Holdings, commercial real estate, import-export, venture capital. The kind of operation that threw charity galas and sponsored Little League teams. The kind of front that worked because most people wanted to believe the best about money. Lena didn't have that luxury. Cruz. Adrian's voice cut through her concentration. Not loud. He never needed to be loud. My office. She saved her work, smoothed her skirt, and walked through his door with her spine straight and her expression blank. Professional, untouchable. The mask she'd perfected over years of making herself invisible to dangerous men. Adrian sat behind his desk, perfectly still in that way that made other people fidget. He was younger than most men with his kind of power, 34, maybe 35, with the sort of face that belonged in a cologne ad if you ignored the coldness in his dark eyes. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive everything, down to the fountain pen he probably used to sign death warrants. Close the door. Lena's hand didn't shake. She'd trained it not to. She closed the door with a soft click and stood at the appropriate distance, close enough to hear him clearly, far enough to run if she needed to. Not that running would help. Not from him. You've been efficient, Adrian said, leaning back in his chair. Daniel said you reorganized 5 years of contract files in under a week, that you found discrepancies he'd missed for months. I'm thorough, Mr. Varelli. Adrian. He corrected her the way he always did, like he thought first names would make them equals, like she could forget what he was. And thorough is an understatement. You also speak 3 languages, have a degree in business administration from a decent school, and type faster than anyone I've seen. He was building to something. Men like Adrian didn't give compliments without purpose. You're qualified for positions that pay significantly more than what I'm offering, he continued. Legitimate positions, clean ones. So I'm curious, Lena, why are you here? There it was. The question she'd been dreading since her interview. She'd practiced her answer, kept it vague enough to be useless, but specific enough to sound true. I needed work. You were hiring. Bullshit. The word landed like a slap. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his desk, and pinned her with a look that could dissect lies. Women with your credentials don't end up working for men like me unless they're running from something worse. So I'll ask again, and this time I want the truth. Why are you here? Lena's jaw tightened. She could feel the familiar panic rising, the trapped animal feeling that made her want to bolt, to lie, to do whatever it took to escape the cage of his attention. But she was so tired of running, so tired of lying. And maybe, just maybe, if she gave him something true, he'd stop looking at her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. I needed to disappear, she said quietly. Your type of operation doesn't ask questions, doesn't run background checks the legal way, doesn't care if someone's trying to stay off certain radars. Adrian's expression didn't change. What radar? Does it matter? To me? Yes, Lena laughed, a bitter, broken sound that hurt her throat. You want the truth? Fine. I'm hiding from my ex-husband, Marcus Delaney. Maybe you know him. Real estate developer, city council connections, the kind of man who donates to women's shelters while he's breaking his wife's ribs. The words tumbled out faster now, years of silence cracking open. I left him 2 years ago, got a restraining order, changed my name, moved across the state. He found me anyway, hired a private investigator, tracked me down, showed up at my apartment with flowers and apologies and threats. So I moved again. And again. 6 cities in 2 years, Mr. Varelli. 6 different names, 6 different lives. And he keeps finding me because men like Marcus have money and connections, and this idea that they own you even after you leave. She was breathing too hard now, her mask slipping. So yes, I took this job because I knew you wouldn't ask questions. Because men who work in the shadows understand that sometimes people need to vanish. And because maybe, a man like you is dangerous enough that a man like Marcus would think twice before coming after me here. Silence filled the office like water rising. Lena waited for Adrian to tell her she was fired, that he didn't need her drama, that she should have lied better. Instead, something shifted in his face, something that looked almost like rage, but colder, more controlled. "Delaney," Adrian said, his voice so quiet it was almost gentle. "Marcus Delaney, real estate, city council. You know him?" "I know of him. Cross-promoted a development deal last year. Smiled too much, talked too loud." Adrian's fingers drummed once against his desk. "Tell me what he did. All of it." "I don't—" "All of it, Lena." So she told him. Not everything. There were some things you couldn't say out loud without breaking completely, but enough. The first time Marcus hit her, 6 months after their wedding, because dinner was late and he'd had a bad day. How he'd apologized, cried, swore it would never happen again. How it always happened again. The broken arm she'd explained away as a fall. The bruises she'd covered with makeup and long sleeves. The night he'd locked her in their bedroom for 16 hours because she'd smiled at a waiter. "I finally left after he—" Lena's voice cracked. She swallowed hard, forced herself to continue. "After he held a pillow over my face until I passed out. When I woke up, he was crying again, telling me he loved me, that he'd never meant to go so far, that I'd pushed him to it." She looked at Adrian directly for the first time since she'd started talking. "I left that night, took nothing but my purse and my car keys, drove until I ran out of gas, then kept going, and I've been running ever since." Adrian stood slowly, moving around his desk with the controlled grace of a predator. Lena's instinct screamed at her to back away, but she held her ground. She was done running from men. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated, and see the thin white scar on his hand up close. A knife wound, probably, the kind you got in fights that didn't follow rules. "Look at me," Adrian said softly. Lena did. His eyes weren't cold anymore. They were burning. "I need you to understand something," he continued, his voice carrying that dangerous quietness that made her skin prickle. "You work for me now. That means you're under my protection. That means no one, and I mean no one, touches you without answering to me. Do you understand?" "You don't have to." "Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good." Adrian stepped back, and somehow that made him more intimidating, not less. "Marcus Delaney will not find you here. And if he does, he'll regret it in ways his city council connections can't fix." Lena should have felt relieved, should have felt grateful. Instead, she felt something closer to fear because the look on Adrian's face wasn't heroic or noble. It was pure, controlled fury, the kind that toppled empires and left bodies in its wake. "I don't want you to hurt him because of me," she said. "Too late." Adrian returned to his desk, picked up his phone, and pressed a button. "Dominic." "My office." "Now." Within 30 seconds, a man built like a concrete wall entered without knocking. Dominic Reeves, Adrian's head of security, which was a polite way of saying his enforcer. Lena had seen him exactly 3 times, and each time she'd made sure to be somewhere else as quickly as possible. "Dom, I need information on Marcus Delaney. Real estate developer, city council connections, everything. Financials, associates, properties, habits, weaknesses. I want to know where he eats breakfast and what brand of toothpaste he uses." Dominic's expression never changed. "Timeline? 24 hours. Done." Dominic left as quickly as he'd arrived. Lena felt dizzy. "Why are you doing this?" Adrian looked at her like the answer should be obvious. Because he hurt you. You don't even know me. I know enough. He sat down again, back to business, as if he hadn't just casually ordered surveillance on her ex-husband. You're intelligent, capable, and brave enough to walk into a job with a man like me rather than keep running. That's worth protecting. Lena didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process the fact that Adrian Varelli, a man who ran a criminal empire, who'd probably killed more people than she'd ever meet, was looking at her like she mattered. Like her pain made him angry in a way that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with something raw and human. I should get back to work, she managed. One more thing. Adrian's voice stopped her at the door. You're moving into one of my properties. Building on 5th with security, doorman, the works. Your things will be transferred this evening. I can't afford. You're not paying. It's part of your employment package now. His tone left no room for argument. I don't take chances with my people, Lena, and you're my people now. Lena left his office feeling like she'd stepped into a different reality, one where powerful men protected instead of hunted, where someone actually cared that she'd been hurt. It was probably dangerous to feel hopeful. Hope had a way of getting you killed in Adrian's world. But as she sat back at her desk and tried to focus on spreadsheets, she couldn't shake the memory of his face when she'd told him about Marcus. That cold, precise rage that promised retribution. For the first time in 2 years, Lena Cruz felt something that almost resembled safe. The apartment Adrian provided wasn't just nice, it was obscene. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, marble countertops, furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Lena stood in the center of the living room that evening, surrounded by the few boxes that contained her entire life, and tried not to feel like she'd traded one cage for another. Except Adrian's cage had a doorman named Victor who smiled at her kindly and security cameras that made her feel protected instead of watched. Adrian's cage had a kitchen with actual food in it. Someone had stocked the fridge and pantry before she arrived. Adrian's cage had a bathroom with a tub big enough to drown in and water pressure that felt like luxury. She unpacked methodically, putting her few clothes in a closet designed for someone who owned more than 3 pairs of shoes. Her laptop on the desk. Her mother's photograph, the only family picture she'd kept, on the nightstand. Her phone rang just as she finished. Unknown number. Lena's blood went cold. Marcus had called from unknown numbers before, blocking his information so she couldn't screen him. She stared at the phone, heart hammering, finger hovering over the decline button. It rang again. Answer it, Adrian's voice came from behind her. Lena spun around. He stood in her doorway, in her apartment, looking completely at ease in his expensive suit. How he'd gotten in without her hearing was a question she decided not to ask. How did you? Your security system is linked to mine. I saw you'd arrived. He gestured at her phone, still ringing. Answer it. I want to hear his voice. What if it's not him? Then we'll know that too. Lena picked up the phone with shaking hands. Hello? Lena, baby, I've been so worried about you. Marcus. Of course it was Marcus. His voice was smooth, concerned, like he was a loving husband checking on his wife instead of the man she'd fled from. How did you get this number? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. That doesn't matter. What matters is you're safe. I know you're in the city. I have friends who've seen you. You're working for some businessman, real estate or something? Lena, you don't have to hide from me anymore. I've changed. I've been getting help, going to therapy, dealing with my anger issues. Adrian held out his hand. Lena looked at him, confused, until he mouthed one word. Phone. She handed it over without thinking. Marcus Delaney. Adrian's voice was pleasant, conversational, the way you'd greet an old friend. This is Adrian Varelli. I'm Lena's employer, and as of today, the only person you need to worry about. Silence on the other end. Then, who the fuck is this? I just told you, Adrian Varelli. You might have heard the name. I have interests in various business sectors throughout the city, real estate included. Adrian walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. Here's how this is going to work, Marcus. You're going to delete this number. You're going to forget Lena exists. And you're going to pray that I'm feeling merciful enough to let our conversation end here. You can't threaten me. I have connections. To who? City Council? Adrian laughed, and the sound made Lena's skin crawl. Marcus, I own half the councilmen you donate to. The other half owe me favors they'll never be able to repay. Your connections are middle management at best. Mine go all the way to the top. So when I tell you to leave Lena alone, I'm not threatening you. I'm giving you the only chance you're going to get. She's my wife. Ex-wife. And she stopped being your anything the moment you decided beating women made you feel like a man. Adrian's voice dropped, losing all pretense of friendliness. Touch her again, call her again, come within 100 feet of her, and I will make sure you understand exactly what happens to men who hurt what's mine. He ended the call and handed the phone back to Lena. Change your number tomorrow. My office will set it up. Lena stared at him. What's yours? Excuse me? You said you called me. She couldn't finish the sentence. Adrian's expression softened slightly. A figure of speech. You work for me, which means you're under my protection. That's all I meant. But Lena had heard the possessiveness in his voice, the way he'd said mine like he meant it down to his bones. And the terrifying part was that she didn't feel trapped by it. She felt safe, which was insane because Adrian Varelli was dangerous. More dangerous than Marcus could ever dream of being. The kind of man who spoke casually about owning city councilmen and making people understand pain. Thank you, she said quietly. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Don't thank me yet. Marcus seems like the type who doesn't take warnings seriously. When he ignores this one, and he will, things will get messy. I don't want you to hurt him because of me. You said that already. Adrian moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm not doing this because of you. I'm doing this because men like Marcus need to learn that actions have consequences. Consider yourself a convenient excuse to teach a lesson I've wanted to teach for a while. It was a lie. Lena could see it in the tension of his jaw, the controlled way he held himself. Adrian Varelli was doing this because she'd told him her story and something in him had cracked. Because for reasons she couldn't understand, her pain had made him angry in a way that went beyond business. Will you kill him? She asked. Adrian looked back at her. Do you want me to? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. Lena thought about Marcus's hands around her throat, his voice in her ear telling her she deserved it, the years she'd lost to fear and running and checking over her shoulder every second. No, she said finally. I want him to leave me alone. I want him to forget I exist. Her voice broke. I just want to be free of him. Then that's what you'll get. Adrian opened the door. The building has security, but here's my number anyway. He handed her a card with a single phone number written on it in precise handwriting. You need anything, you call. Don't hesitate. It's almost midnight. I don't sleep much. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Occupational hazard. Good night, Lena. He left, and Lena stood alone in her beautiful new apartment, holding a card with a crime lord's personal number and trying to understand how her life had turned into something she didn't recognize. Her phone buzzed, a text from a blocked number. This isn't over. Marcus. Of course. Lena looked at Adrian's number on the card, thought about calling him, then decided against it. She could handle one text. She'd been handling Marcus's threats for 2 years, but when she finally went to bed that night, she kept her phone on the nightstand with Adrian's number pulled up, just in case. Adrian didn't go home. He went back to his office and pulled Marcus Delaney's file. The preliminary one Dominic had already started compiling. Marcus Delaney, age 36. Real estate developer with family money and political aspirations. Member of 3 country clubs, donor to various charities, married once. To Lena Martinez, now Lena Cruz. Divorced 2 years ago under sealed court records, which meant lawyers and money had been involved in keeping things quiet. He hit her, Adrian said to Dominic, who'd appeared in his office without knocking. Old habit from their military days, Dom never knocked unless there was company. Gathered that from your tone earlier. Dominic sat in the chair across from Adrian's desk, his massive frame making the expensive furniture look normal-sized. We doing this? We're doing this. Could get complicated. He's got connections. To who? Council members? Judges? Adrian laughed without humor. Dom, we own this city's infrastructure. Marcus Delaney is a trust fund baby playing at power. He doesn't understand what real power looks like. Not arguing, just making sure you're thinking clearly. Dominic's expression never changed. He'd been with Adrian for 15 years since they'd both been young and violent and looking for purpose after the military spat them out. He knew better than anyone when Adrian was making decisions with his head versus his gut. This is clear thinking, is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you just moved an assistant you've known for 3 weeks into one of your penthouses, threatened a city council-connected developer, and you're currently looking at his file like you want to burn his world down. That's not business, Adrian. That's personal. Adrian closed the file. She was holding a pillow over her face until she passed out, Dom. He broke her arm, locked her in a room, spent 2 years hunting her across state lines because he thinks he owns her. And that's terrible. I'm not saying it isn't, but we've known about dozens of men doing worse to people we don't know. Why is this one different? That was the question, wasn't it? Why did Lena's story make Adrian's blood boil when he'd heard worse 100 times? Why had seeing her standing in his office, finally telling the truth after weeks of careful masks, made something shift in his chest? She was brave, Adrian said finally, coming to work for me, knowing what I am, because she thought maybe a monster would protect her from a worse monster. That takes guts. I respect guts. Dominic stood. We'll handle Marcus. Quietly. No bodies, no mess, just enough pressure that he understands the consequences of ignoring your warning. But Adrian, be careful with this one. She's not like the others. I know. After Dominic left, Adrian pulled up the surveillance feed from Lena's apartment building. He could see her bedroom window from the camera angles, lights off, which meant she was trying to sleep. He should stop watching, should turn off the feed and focus on actual business. But he kept the window open, a small square of light on his monitor, and told himself it was just about security. The lie was getting harder to believe. Lena dreamed about Marcus that night, the same nightmare she'd been having for 2 years, locked in their old bedroom, pounding on the door while he laughed on the other side. In the dream, she could never break through, could never escape. She woke up gasping, tangled in sheets that were too expensive, in a room that was too beautiful, in a life that didn't feel real. Her phone showed 4:47 a.m. She got up, made coffee in a kitchen she still didn't recognize, and stood by the windows watching the city wake up below. From this height, everything looked clean, orderly, like the violence and pain happening at street level couldn't reach her here. A knock on her door made her jump, splashing coffee on her hand. Who knocked at 5 a.m.? Lena looked through the peephole and saw Adrian, still in yesterday's suit, looking like he hadn't slept at all. She opened the door. Is something wrong? Got a text about movement in your building. Wanted to check. His eyes scanned her quickly, cataloging, assessing, looking for damage. You're awake early. Couldn't sleep. You? Haven't been to bed yet. Adrian noticed her coffee. Mind if I come in? It was her apartment, but they both knew he owned it, owned the building, owned half the city. Saying no wasn't really an option, even if she'd wanted to. Sure. Adrian stepped inside and somehow made the generous living room feel smaller just by being in it. He moved to the windows, hands in his pockets, and stared out at the same view she'd been watching. Marcus texted you, he said. It wasn't a question. How did you... Your phone security is linked to my system. After what you told me yesterday, I had my tech team set up monitoring. If Marcus contacts you in any way, I know about it. He turned to face her. I should have asked permission first. That was an invasion of privacy. I'm sorry. Lena didn't know what surprised her more, that Adrian Varelli had invaded her privacy or that he'd apologized for it. You're monitoring my phone? Just flagging specific contacts. Marcus, anyone connected to him, any unknown numbers that contact you repeatedly. I'm not reading your messages to friends or listening to your personal calls. Adrian looked almost uncomfortable, which was odd on a man who usually projected absolute control. I needed to know if he escalated. Needed to... He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. I needed to make sure you were safe. By spying on me. Yes. No justification, no excuse, just honesty. If that's unacceptable, I'll have the monitoring removed. But, Lena, I need you to understand, men like Marcus don't stop. They escalate. And I'd rather invade your privacy than find out too late that he'd gotten to you. Lena should have been angry, should have felt violated, trapped, controlled all over again. Instead, she felt that dangerous warmth spreading through her chest, the feeling that someone was watching not to control her, but to protect her. Keep the monitoring, she said quietly. You're sure? Marcus won't stop. You said it yourself. So if tracking my phone means you know when he tries something, she met Adrian's eyes. Then I want you to track it. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Relief, maybe. Or something deeper. Thank you for trusting me. I'm not sure I do, Lena admitted. Trust you, I mean. You're dangerous, Adrian. More dangerous than Marcus, probably. The things you do, the empire you run, I'm not stupid. I know what happens in your world. Then why stay? Because you're dangerous to other people. Not to me. The words came out before she could stop them. Truth she hadn't meant to speak. When you looked at me yesterday, when I told you about Marcus, you weren't angry at me. You were angry for me. That's different. Adrian moved closer, and Lena's breath caught. He stopped just outside her personal space, close enough to touch, but not touching. I need you to understand something, he said softly. My world is violent. The people in it are violent, and I'm very, very good at violence, Lena. That doesn't change just because I'm choosing not to direct it at you. I know. Do you? Because I don't think you've really processed what it means that Marcus Delaney threatened you, and I responded by having him surveilled like a terrorist. I don't think you understand that if he touches you again, I won't call the police. I'll handle it myself in ways that would make you sick if you knew the details. Lena should have backed away, should have been afraid. Instead, she stepped closer. Good, she said. Adrian's eyes widened slightly, surprise which she'd never seen on him before. Good? Marcus hurt me for 3 years, Adrian. Beat me, controlled me, hunted me when I finally escaped. And the police did nothing. The restraining orders did nothing. Running did nothing except delay the inevitable. Her voice shook but didn't break. So yes, good. If you're willing to do what the law wouldn't, if you're willing to make him afraid the way he made me afraid, then good. I'm done being the only one who's scared. For a long moment, Adrian just looked at her. Then he smiled. Not his professional smile or his cold smile, but something real and almost proud. You're tougher than I thought. I've had to be. Not anymore. Adrian stepped back, giving her space she hadn't asked for, but appreciated anyway. I should go. Let you get ready for work. Will you sleep at all? Eventually. I'll catch a few hours at the office. He moved toward the door, then paused. Lena, what you said about trusting me, you're smart not to. Trust is dangerous in my world, but I want you to know that whatever else I am, whatever else I do, I meant what I said yesterday. You're under my protection now. That's not a figure of speech. That's a promise. He left before she could respond. Lena stood in her apartment as the sun rose over the city, holding her coffee and trying to understand how Adrian Virelli had become the safest person in her life. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first real breath she'd taken in years. The day Marcus Delaney ignored Adrian's warning, Lena was reorganizing files in Adrian's office. She heard the commotion from the hallway first, raised voices, Dominic's low growl, then a crash that made her jump. Adrian appeared in his doorway, perfectly calm, and said 3 words that changed everything. Get behind me. She did. And when Marcus burst into the office, drunk and furious and demanding his wife back, when he lunged at Lena with violence in his eyes, Adrian moved. Fast, precise, brutal. Lena watched her ex-husband hit the floor, watched Adrian's knee on his back, watched the cold fury in Adrian's face as he pressed Marcus down with the kind of controlled violence that promised this was just the beginning. I gave you a chance, Adrian said quietly. You should have taken it. Later, after Dominic had dragged Marcus away, after the office had been cleaned and normal business resumed, Adrian sat across from Lena and asked the question that unraveled everything. Do you want me to stop? And Lena, looking at the man who'd just beaten her ex-husband unconscious, who ran a criminal empire, who was dangerous and cold and utterly in control, Lena surprised herself. No, she said. I want you to finish it. Adrian smiled then, a real smile. The kind that suggested maybe he was just as broken as she was. Good, he said, because I wasn't planning to stop anyway. That was the moment Lena Cruz realized she wasn't just working for Adrian Virelli anymore. She was falling for him, and that was more dangerous than anything Marcus could ever do to her. Marcus Delaney disappeared from the city 3 days after Adrian's men dragged him out of the office. Not dead. Adrian had made that clear to Lena, but gone in the way people went when they understood that staying meant consequences they couldn't survive. He's in Nevada, Adrian told her over coffee in his office the following Monday. Sold his properties here at a loss, resigned from the city council, and relocated his entire operation. My people made sure he understood that crossing state lines back into our territory would be the last mistake he ever made. Lena wrapped her hands around her mug, trying to process the information. Marcus was gone. Actually gone. After 2 years of running, of looking over her shoulder, of changing her name and her life every few months, he was just gone. You're sure? Dominic watched him get on the plane personally. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her face. He won't come back, Lena. He's too smart for that. Cowards like Marcus only fight battles they know they can win. And he knows he can't win against me. The relief should have been overwhelming. Instead, Lena felt hollow. Empty. Like she'd been carrying a weight for so long that without it, she didn't know how to stand straight. I don't know what to do now, she said quietly. What do you mean? I've spent 2 years running from him. Every decision I made, every place I went, every name I used, it was all about staying ahead of Marcus. And now he's just gone. I don't know who I am when I'm not running. Adrian set down his coffee and came around the desk. He'd been doing that more often lately, leaving the power position behind his desk to sit beside her like they were equals. Like she wasn't his employee and he wasn't a crime lord who'd just forcibly relocated her ex-husband. You're Lena Cruz, he said. 28 years old, speaks 3 languages, has a degree she's never gotten to use because she's been surviving instead of living. You like your coffee with too much sugar, you organize files like you're conducting surgery, and you haven't let yourself want anything in so long that you've forgotten what it feels like. Lena looked at him, startled. How do you... I pay attention. Adrian's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. And I think it's time you started wanting things again, living instead of hiding. I don't even know what I want anymore. Then we'll figure it out. He stood, offering his hand. Come on, we're leaving. Leaving? Adrian, it's Monday. We have meetings that can wait, calls that can be returned. Lena, when was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Not because you had to, not because you were running, just because it made you happy. She couldn't remember. The realization hit her hard. She genuinely couldn't remember the last time she'd done anything for joy instead of survival. Exactly, Adrian said, reading her expression. So today, you're going to start remembering what that feels like. And I'm going to help. 20 minutes later, they were in Adrian's car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than most people's houses, driving through the city towards somewhere Adrian wouldn't tell her about. This is kidnapping, Lena said, but she was smiling slightly. Technically, you came willingly. You're my boss. There's a power dynamic. Fair point. Adrian glanced at her, amusement in his dark eyes. Would you like me to turn around? Lena thought about going back to the office, to her organized files and her careful routines. Thought about the apartment she'd barely personalized because part of her still expected to run at any moment. Thought about the life she'd been living, small and scared and constantly looking backward. No, she said. Keep driving. They ended up at a photography gallery tucked into a converted warehouse on the west side. Lena hadn't even known it existed, but Adrian walked in like he owned the place, which, knowing Adrian, he probably did. Why here? She asked as they moved through rooms filled with stunning black and white photographs. You had a camera in one of your boxes, Adrian said. Old Nikon, professional grade. You tried to hide it under clothes, but I saw it when I checked your apartment's security feed. You were watching me unpack? I was making sure no one else was watching you unpack. He stopped in front of a photograph of a woman's hands holding a broken bird. You used to take pictures, didn't you, before Marcus? Lena's throat tightened. She'd forgotten she still had that camera, had forgotten a lot of things about the person she used to be. Photography was my major, she admitted, before I switched to business administration because Marcus said art degrees were worthless. I wanted to do photojournalism, travel, document real stories. She stopped, the words painful. But that person feels like someone else now. She doesn't have to be. Adrian turned to face her fully. Marcus is gone, Lena. You don't have to be the person he made you into anymore. You can go back to being the person you were before him. Or you can become someone entirely new. But either way, You get to choose now. That's what freedom means. Lena walked through the gallery in silence, looking at images that captured moments of beauty and pain and truth. Each photograph told a story of people, of places, of emotions too big for words, and something in her chest, something that had been locked down tight for years, started to crack open. I want to take pictures again, she said finally, the words feeling dangerous and brave at the same time. Then you will. Just like that? Adrian smiled. Just like that. We'll get you equipment, a studio if you want one. You can work for me part-time and spend the rest pursuing photography. Or quit entirely and I'll fund your work until you're established. Whatever you want, Lena. Why would you do that? Because I can. Because you deserve it. Because... He stopped himself, seeming to reconsider his words. Because I want to see what you create when you're not afraid anymore. They spent 3 hours in that gallery. Adrian bought her 2 books by photographers she'd never heard of, made reservations at a restaurant that had a 6-month waiting list, and listened to her talk about composition and light and the difference between documenting reality and creating art. Over dinner, Lena asked the question she'd been avoiding for weeks. Why me, Adrian? He looked up from his wine. What do you mean? You have dozens of employees, hundreds probably. People who work for you, people who you protect in a general way because that's what bosses do. But this, she gestured between them. This isn't general. You move me into your building, you threaten Marcus personally, you're taking me to art galleries and offering to fund my dreams. Why? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he set down his glass and met her eyes directly. Honestly, I don't completely know. When you told me about Marcus, about what he did to you, something in me just... He made a frustrated gesture. I've heard worse stories, Lena. I've seen things that would make what Marcus did look tame. But when you stood in my office and told me he held a pillow over your face, I wanted to kill him. Not his business, not his strategy. I wanted him dead for hurting you specifically. That's irrational, I know. Dominic's been telling me the same thing for 2 weeks. Adrian leaned forward slightly. I've built my empire on control, Lena. On being able to separate emotion from business, personal from professional. And then you walked in with your careful masks and your organized files, and somehow you cracked something in me that I didn't know could crack. Lena's heart was hammering. What are you saying? I'm saying I care about you. More than I should, more than is smart, more than I've cared about anyone in a very long time. And I don't know what to do with that except try to give you back the life Marcus took from you. The waiter appeared with their entrees, and the moment shattered. But throughout dinner, Lena couldn't stop thinking about Adrian's words, about the way he'd looked at her when he said them, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen him. Adrian Virelli, who controlled the city's underground with an iron fist, who made grown men afraid with a single look, who'd built an empire on violence and strategy, cared about her. It should have terrified her, should have sent her running again. Instead, it made her want to lean closer. After dinner, Adrian drove her back to her apartment building, but didn't leave immediately. They sat in the car in the underground parking garage, the engine ticking as it cooled, neither of them moving to leave. I have a confession, Lena said into the silence. What's that? I looked you up. After the first week working for you, found articles, reports, police investigations that went nowhere. Adrian Virelli, suspected of running a criminal enterprise but never charged. Connected to disappearances, to money laundering, to violence. They can't prove anything, but they know what you are. And yet you stayed. Because I'm what I am too. Lena turned to face him in the dim light. I'm a woman who married a monster, who stayed with him for 3 years while he broke me down piece by piece. I'm someone who ran instead of fighting back, who hid instead of getting help, who came to work for a crime lord because I thought maybe evil could protect me from evil. We're both broken, Adrian, just in different ways. I'm not broken, Adrian said quietly. I'm deliberate. Everything I've done, every choice I've made, I meant it. Violence, control, empire. I chose all of it with clear eyes. You had that choice stolen from you. That's different. Is it? Because right now, sitting here with you, I'm choosing something I know I shouldn't choose. I'm choosing to trust someone dangerous, to care about someone who's probably going to hurt me eventually, even if he doesn't mean to. And I'm doing it anyway because... She stopped, the words too big. Because why?
Wann sie
Because you make me feel safe. and alive. And like maybe I'm worth protecting, Lena's voice cracked. And I haven't felt any of those things in so long, Adrian. So even if this is a mistake, even if I'm trading one dangerous situation for another, I don't want to run anymore. I want to stay. Adrian reached across the console and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused in places that suggested violence and work, and his fingers intertwined with hers like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Then stay, he said simply. They sat like that for several minutes, holding hands in a parking garage like teenagers, neither of them willing to break the moment. Finally, Adrian pulled back. I should let you go. It's late. Yeah, but Lena didn't move. Lena, I know. This is complicated. You're my boss. You're dangerous. We barely know each other. I know all of that, but... She looked at him directly. But I want to know you anyway. Is that okay? Adrian smiled, one of those rare, real smiles that transformed his entire face. Yeah, that's okay. Lena went upstairs feeling lighter than she had in years. She unpacked her camera that night, cleaned the lens, charged the batteries. Took a few test shots of the city lights from her window, of the contrast between shadow and illumination, of the way darkness could make light more beautiful. She was reviewing the images when her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. I meant what I said about caring, about wanting to see what you create, about all of it. Lena smiled and typed back, I know. I meant what I said too. Get some sleep, Lena. You too. Eventually, she fell asleep that night with her camera on the nightstand and her phone showing Adrian's last message. And for the first time in 2 years, she didn't dream about Marcus at all. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Lena worked for Adrian in the mornings, organizing his legitimate business operations with the same efficiency she'd always shown. But her afternoons were her own, spent relearning photography, exploring the city with fresh eyes, rediscovering the person she'd been before Marcus. Adrian set up a studio space in one of his buildings, complete with equipment that made Lena's old camera look like a toy. He didn't ask to see her work, didn't push her to share before she was ready, just gave her the space and freedom to create. You're different, Dominic commented one afternoon when Lena was leaving the office early. Lighter. Is that okay? She'd never had a real conversation with Dominic before. The man was terrifying on a good day. It's fine. Adrian's different too. Dominic's expression remained neutral, but something in his voice suggested approval. Less angry, more human. That's your doing. I don't... Yeah, you do. Boss has been wound tight for years, running himself into the ground building this empire. Then you show up, all organized files and traumatized eyes, and something in him just shifted. Dominic leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He cares about you. You know that, right? He told me. I figured. Adrian doesn't do subtle. A ghost of a smile crossed Dominic's face. Just be careful with him, yeah? He acts like he's invincible, like nothing touches him. But the things that do get through, they hit hard. And you got through, Lena, whether you meant to or not. The word stayed with Lena as she walked to her studio. She'd been so focused on her own feelings, her own healing, that she hadn't fully considered what this was doing to Adrian. How caring about her might be changing him, cracking the control he'd built his entire life around. She found him waiting at her studio when she arrived, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, tie loosened and jacket discarded. He looked exhausted. Hey, she said softly. You okay? Rough day. Had to handle some business that got messy. He rubbed his face. Didn't want to go home to an empty penthouse. Thought I'd see if you were working late. Lena sat down beside him, their shoulders touching. Want to talk about it? No. Yes. I don't know. Adrian's laugh was bitter. Someone tried to move product through my territory without permission. Had to make an example, send a message. It's part of the business, part of maintaining control. But lately... He stopped. Lately what? Lately it feels different, heavier, like I'm seeing my world through your eyes and recognizing how ugly it all is. He turned to look at her. You make me want to be better, Lena, and I don't know if I can be. Lena took his hand, the gesture becoming familiar now. I'm not asking you to be different. I know what you are, Adrian. I've always known. And I'm still here. You shouldn't be. Probably not, but I am anyway. She squeezed his fingers. You gave me back my life. Let me help you carry yours, even if it's heavy. Adrian pulled her closer, and Lena let herself lean into him. They sat like that on her studio floor, two broken people holding each other up, while the city moved on outside. "I'm falling for you," Adrian said quietly. In case that wasn't obvious, Lena's breath caught. "It's obvious. And? And I'm falling too. Has been for a while now." She looked up at him. "This is probably a terrible idea." "Definitely a terrible idea. We should be more careful. Professional boundaries, all that." "Absolutely." But Adrian was smiling now, and he didn't let go of her hand. They stayed in the studio until late, talking about everything and nothing. Adrian told her about his childhood, a father who died young, a mother who worked 3 jobs, a younger sister he'd protected from neighborhood violence until she was old enough to escape to college. How he'd joined the military looking for purpose and found Dominic instead. How they'd come home to nothing and built something from violence and strategy and sheer will. Lena told him about her own past, parents who died in a car accident when she was 19, leaving her alone with insurance money and grief. How she'd thrown herself into school, into photography, into dreaming of a life bigger than her small hometown. How she'd met Marcus at a gallery opening and thought his attention meant love instead of ownership. "We're both orphans," Adrian observed, "both trying to build families from nothing. Except your family is a criminal empire, and yours is a camera and a boss who's completely gone on you." He kissed her forehead, casual and sweet. "We work with what we have." The kiss was a turning point. After that night, things shifted between them in ways both subtle and obvious. Adrian touched her more. Small gestures like a hand on her back, fingers brushing hers when passing documents, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. Lena found herself seeking him out during the day, bringing him coffee the way he liked it, staying late just to share quiet moments in his office. Dominic noticed, of course. So did the rest of Adrian's inner circle, but no one said anything directly, just adjusted to the new reality of Lena Cruz being important to their boss in ways that went beyond administrative efficiency. "The men are calling you the queen," Dominic mentioned casually one afternoon. Lena nearly dropped her coffee. "What?" "Adrian's queen. You haven't noticed the way they defer to you now? How when you ask for something, it gets done immediately?" Dominic's expression was amused. "They've figured out that making you happy makes the boss happy, and a happy boss is good for everyone's health." I'm not." "You are, though, whether you want the title or not." Dominic's voice turned serious. "Which means you need to be careful, Lena. Adrian has enemies, and now that they know he cares about you, you become a target." The warning proved prophetic faster than Lena expected. It happened 3 weeks after the studio conversation. Lena was leaving a coffee shop downtown, arms full of camera equipment and thinking about a shoot she was planning, when a car pulled up beside her. Black sedan, tinted windows, wrong in a way she couldn't immediately name. The back door opened and a man stepped out. Mid-50s, expensive suit, face she recognized from Adrian's files. Carlo Marchetti, head of a rival operation that had been pushing against Adrian's territory for months. "Miss Cruz," Marchetti said pleasantly, "I was hoping we could talk." Lena's instincts screamed. She reached for her phone, but 2 more men appeared from the car, blocking her path. "I wouldn't," Marchetti continued. "This can be a pleasant conversation or an unpleasant one. Your choice. Adrian will do exactly what I expect him to do, which is why we're having this chat." Marchetti gestured to the car. "Please, just a few minutes of your time." Lena calculated her options. Run and get grabbed anyway, fight and lose badly, scream and maybe get hurt before help arrived, or play along and hope Adrian's monitoring system was as thorough as he'd promised. She got in the car. Marchetti sat across from her, 2 bodyguards flanking him. The car started moving immediately. "You're probably wondering why I went to the trouble of this meeting," Marchetti said. "Kidnapping, you mean. Semantics. I prefer to think of it as a strategic conversation." He smiled, all teeth. "You're important to Adrian Varelli. Everyone knows it. The way he looks at you, the resources he's dedicated to your protection, it's unlike him. Adrian doesn't do attachments. Makes him weak." Lena kept her face blank. "If you're planning to use me against him..." "Oh, I am. But not the way you're thinking." Marchetti leaned forward. "I'm giving you a chance to walk away, Miss Cruz, leave the city, start fresh somewhere Adrian's influence doesn't reach. I'll even fund it. New identity, housing, whatever you need. All I ask in return is that you disappear completely. No contact with Varelli, no looking back. Why would you do that? Because Adrian distracted is Adrian vulnerable, and Adrian heartbroken is even better. You leave, he falls apart, his empire cracks, and I move in to fill the vacuum. Everyone wins. Except Adrian, of course, but he's been winning for too long anyway. Lena stared at this man who'd just confirmed every fear she'd had about being with Adrian. She was a weakness, a liability, a crack in his armor that enemies could exploit. And if I say no? Marchetti's expression hardened. Then we move to less pleasant options. You seem like a smart woman, Miss Cruz, smart enough to recognize when you're in over your head. Adrian's world isn't for people like you, soft people who still believe in things like love and safety. It will destroy you eventually. I'm offering you an exit before that happens. The car stopped. Lena realized they were back at the coffee shop. The whole conversation had happened while driving in a circle. Think about it, Marchetti said as his men opened the door. You have 48 hours. Then I'll assume you've made your choice and act accordingly. Lena stumbled out of the car, her camera equipment still somehow in her arms, and watched the sedan drive away. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped her gear. Her phone rang immediately. Adrian. Lena, are you hurt? So he had been watching, had seen everything but couldn't get there in time. I'm okay. Shaken, but okay. Stay there. I'm 3 minutes out. He made it in 2. Lena saw his car screech up, saw him burst out before it fully stopped, saw the fear on his face that he couldn't quite hide. He pulled her into his arms right there on the sidewalk, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I'm sorry, he said against her hair. I'm so sorry. I should have seen this coming, should have protected you better. Adrian, I'm fine. He just talked. He took you off the street, Lena. Put you in a car against your will. That's not fine. He pulled back, hands on her shoulders, eyes searching her face. What did he say? Lena told him everything. About Marchetti's offer, about the 48-hour deadline, about being called Adrian's weakness. Adrian's expression went cold in that way that meant someone was going to pay. Get in the car. We're going somewhere secure. Your office? My home. Marchetti knows my office, knows my routines. But my penthouse is private, safer. He helped her into the car, gentle despite his obvious fury. And Lena? Whatever Marchetti said about you being my weakness, he's wrong. You're not my weakness. You're my reason for being stronger than I've ever had to be. They drove to Adrian's building in tense silence. Lena had never been to his home before. They'd always met at the office, at her apartment, at her studio. Crossing this threshold felt significant somehow. The penthouse was stunning and impersonal at the same time. Expensive furniture, incredible view, absolutely nothing that suggested anyone actually lived there. No photographs, no personal items, no warmth. It looked like a hotel room for rich ghosts. I'm going to handle Marchetti, Adrian said, pouring them both drinks with hands that were steadier than Lena's. Permanently. He crossed a line today that can't be uncrossed. What does permanently mean? Adrian met her eyes. It means he won't threaten you again, ever. Do you need more details than that? Lena thought about Marcus, about how Adrian had made him disappear. Thought about the empire Adrian ran, the violence he was capable of, the lines he'd crossed for people he cared about. No, she said finally, I don't need details. You sure? Because once this starts, Lena, once I go to war with Marchetti over you, there's no going back. His people will know why. My people will know why. The entire city's underground will know that you're mine, and I'll burn everything down to keep you safe. That's a target you'll wear forever. I'm already wearing it. Marchetti proved that today. Lena took the drink Adrian offered. But he also proved something else. What's that? That I don't want to run anymore. He offered me an out, money, new identity, fresh start away from all this. And my first thought wasn't relief. It was that I'd have to leave you. She set down her glass and moved closer to him. I've been running for 2 years, Adrian. From Marcus, from my past, from anything that might hurt me. And I'm done. Whatever happens with Marchetti, whatever danger comes from being with you, I'd rather face it than run again. Adrian kissed her then. Not gentle or careful, but desperate, like he'd been holding back for weeks and couldn't anymore. Lena kissed him back just as fiercely, months of tension and fear and want finally breaking free. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I know it's too soon. I know it's complicated, but I love you, Lena, and I'm going to make sure Marchetti regrets ever speaking your name." Lena's heart felt too big for her chest. "I love you too," which is probably crazy considering everything, but I do. Definitely crazy. "Yeah," she smiled against his lips, "but I'm done making safe choices. Safe choices got me Marcus. Dangerous choices got me you. I'll take dangerous." They spent the night in Adrian's penthouse, tangled together on his too large bed, talking through fear and plans and what came next. Adrian made calls to Dominic, to his inner circle, setting in motion whatever war he planned to wage against Marchetti. And Lena, for the first time in years, let herself feel protected instead of scared. Let herself trust that Adrian's strength was enough to keep them both safe. It was probably naive, probably foolish, but as dawn broke over the city and Adrian held her close, Lena couldn't bring herself to care. The war started quietly. That was how Adrian operated, not with loud declarations or obvious moves, but with precision strikes that dismantled empires from the inside out. Lena watched it happen from the safety of his penthouse, which had become her home whether she'd consciously decided to move in or not. Marchetti lost 2 shipments overnight, Dominic reported 3 days after the coffee shop incident. He stood in Adrian's living room like he belonged there, which he probably did more than Lena. Clean intercepts, no violence, no traces. He'll know it was us, but he can't prove it. Good. Hit his distribution next. Adrian didn't look up from the tablet he was reviewing. "I want him bleeding money from every angle before we move to the personal phase." Lena sat curled in the corner of Adrian's massive couch, camera in her lap, trying to focus on editing photos while the men she loved planned someone's destruction. The cognitive dissonance was getting harder to manage. How Adrian could be tender with her at night and ruthlessly strategic during the day. How the same hands that held her so carefully could sign off on operations that ruined lives. "You okay over there?" Adrian asked, finally looking up. "Just thinking." About? About how I'm sitting here listening to you dismantle a man's empire, and my biggest concern is whether I got the lighting right in yesterday's shoot. What does that say about me? Dominic made a noise that might have been a laugh. "Says you're adapting. Most people would be having a breakdown right about now." "Maybe I already had my breakdown, and this is what's on the other side." Lena set down her camera. "Adrian, can I ask you something?" "Always. When this is over, when Marchetti is handled or gone or whatever you're planning, what happens next? Another rival moves in, another threat appears, another person tries to use me against you. Does this ever end?" Adrian exchanged a look with Dominic that Lena couldn't quite read. Then Dominic excused himself with some muttered comment about checking perimeter security, leaving them alone. Adrian crossed to the couch and pulled Lena against him. She went willingly, tucking herself under his arm like she'd done it 100 times. "Honestly, I don't know," he said. "This life, my empire, it's built on power and fear and constant vigilance. There's always another threat, another challenge, another person trying to take what's mine. That's the price of staying on top. So I'll always be a target." "Yes. As long as you're with me, you'll always have that risk." He tilted her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "Which is why I'm giving you the same choice Marchetti did, except honestly. You can leave, Lena. I'll set you up somewhere safe, somewhere my world can't touch you. Give you enough money to pursue photography full-time, to build the life you want without looking over your shoulder. No conditions, no strings, just freedom." Lena's heart clenched. "You want me to go?" "No. I want you to stay so badly it's probably unhealthy, but I also want you to have the choice. The real choice. Not one made from fear or dependence. If you stay, it needs to be because you want this life, not because you feel trapped in it." She thought about it, really thought about it, about a life where she could wake up without worrying about rival crime lords, where Adrian's enemies weren't her enemies, where loving someone didn't come with the constant threat of violence. It sounded peaceful, quiet, safe. It also sounded unbearably lonely. "I'm staying," she said firmly. "Not because I don't have other options, but because I choose you. All of you. The empire, the danger, the complicated mess of loving someone in your world. I choose it." Adrian kissed her forehead, and Lena felt the tension leave his body. "You're sure?" "Completely. Besides, She smiled slightly. Someone needs to keep you human. Make sure you remember there's more to life than strategy and control. Is that your job now? Apparently. I'm not great at it yet, but I'm learning. She settled more comfortably against him. So what's the plan with Marchetti? And please don't tell me you're planning to kill him. I meant what I said about choosing this life, but I'd prefer not to have specific body counts attached to my relationship. No killing. Not unless he forces my hand. Adrian's voice was measured, careful. I'm going to offer him the same thing I did Marcus, a chance to leave quietly. Relocate his operation, stay out of my territory, forget you exist. If he's smart, he'll take it. And if he's not smart, then I make him irrelevant. Absorb his operations, turn his people, dismantle everything he's built until there's nothing left worth fighting over. Adrian's fingers traced absent patterns on her shoulder. Either way, you'll be safe. That's non-negotiable. Lena wanted to argue that his safety mattered too, that she couldn't bear the thought of him getting hurt protecting her. But she'd learned enough about Adrian's world to know that showing weakness, even protective weakness, could be dangerous. So she just held him tighter and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The next 2 weeks were tense. Marchetti didn't take Adrian's warning seriously at first, which proved to be a mistake. Shipments continued disappearing. Key lieutenants switched allegiances. Properties got raided by authorities who'd somehow received anonymous tips. Marchetti's empire crumbled piece by piece while Adrian orchestrated from his penthouse, Lena watching the whole thing unfold like a masterclass in strategic warfare. You're terrifyingly good at this, she commented one night, watching Adrian coordinate 3 simultaneous operations via encrypted calls. Years of practice. He ended a call and pulled her into his lap, needing the contact. He'd been doing that more, reaching for her during stressful moments like she was an anchor keeping him grounded. Marchetti's getting desperate. That's when people make mistakes. Is that what you're counting on? Partially. Desperate men do stupid things, but I'm also counting on him being smart enough to recognize when he's lost. Adrian's phone buzzed with another update. He read it and smiled grimly. 3 more of his distributors just came over to our side. He's running out of soldiers. Lena knew she should probably feel guilty about the role she played in Marchetti's downfall. If she'd never come into Adrian's life, if they'd never fallen for each other, none of this would be happening. But she'd stopped apologizing for existing, for being loved, for mattering to someone powerful enough to reshape the city for her safety. When this is over, she said quietly, I want to do a photography series. About the city, the parts people don't usually see. Not crime or violence, but the humanity underneath it all. The people trying to survive in spaces that weren't built for them. Adrian looked at her with something like wonder. You're thinking about art while I'm planning a war. Someone has to remember we're human. She kissed him softly. That's my job, remember? Keeping you grounded. You're doing better than you think. The call came at 3 a.m, exactly 2 weeks after Marchetti's deadline had passed. Adrian's phone lit up the dark bedroom, Dominic's name on the screen. Adrian answered immediately, his voice alert despite the hour. Talk to me. Lena couldn't hear Dominic's response, but she watched Adrian's expression shift from focused to furious in seconds. When? Pause. How many men? Another pause. I'm on my way. Double security on the penthouse. No one in or out except our people. He hung up and was already moving, pulling on clothes with efficient speed. What happened? Lena asked, sitting up. Marchetti hit one of our warehouses, killed 2 of my men, injured 5 others. Adrian's voice was cold, controlled, but Lena could see the rage underneath. He's escalating, making a statement. What kind of statement? That he'd rather burn everything down than admit defeat. Adrian strapped on a shoulder holster. Lena had learned not to flinch when she saw the gun anymore. I have to handle this personally. Show strength, reassure my people. But you need to stay here, Lena. Locked down, security active. Don't answer the door for anyone but Dominic or me. Fear spiked through her chest. Adrian, I'll be fine. This is my world, remember? I know how to handle it. He crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. But I need to know you're safe here. Can you do that for me? Lena wanted to argue, to tell him she could help somehow, to insist on staying together. But she'd meant what she said about choosing this life. And this life sometimes meant watching Adrian walk into danger while she waited behind secure walls. Be careful, she whispered. Always am. He kissed her hard, desperate, like he was memorizing the taste of her. Then he was gone, the penthouse door clicking shut behind him with terrible finality. Lena sat in the dark for a long time after he left. Then she got up, made coffee she didn't drink, and tried to focus on editing photos while her phone stayed silent and the city outside the windows began to wake. The hours crawled. 6 a.m. became 7, became 8. No word from Adrian, no updates from Dominic, just silence that felt increasingly ominous. At 9:30, her phone finally rang. Unknown number. Lena's hand shook as she answered. Hello? Miss Cruz. A voice she didn't recognize, male, accented, professional. My employer would like to speak with you. I'm going to connect you now. Before Lena could respond, the call clicked over. Lena. Marchetti's voice smooth as ever, despite everything Adrian had done to him. I hope I'm not interrupting your morning. Ice flooded Lena's veins. How did you get this number? I have resources too, even with Virelli's attempts to cripple me. But that's not important. What's important is that I have something you want. Or rather, someone. No. You're lying, Lena said, but her voice shook. Am I? Let me prove it. Sounds of movement, then Adrian's voice strained with pain. Lena, don't listen to him, don't. A thud, a grunt, then silence. Adrian! Lena was on her feet, heart hammering. If you hurt him. Hurt him? My dear, your lover killed 2 of my men last night, wounded 5 others. Did he tell you that when he came home? Did he wash their blood off his hands before touching you? Marchetti's voice was pleasant, conversational, like they were discussing weather. I'm simply returning the favor, eye for an eye, as they say. What do you want? The same thing I wanted 2 weeks ago. You, gone. Out of the city, out of Adrian's life, out of my way. Only now the stakes are higher because Adrian decided to be difficult. Marchetti paused for effect. Here's the deal, Lena. You have 6 hours to disappear. Leave the city, leave your phone, leave everything connected to Virelli behind. In exchange, I let him live. Broken, perhaps. Humiliated, certainly, but alive. And if I don't, then I kill him slowly. Make it hurt. Send pieces of him back to his own people as a reminder of what happens when you cross me. The pleasantness dropped from Marchetti's voice, replaced by cold fury. Adrian Virelli destroyed my empire for you, turned my soldiers against me, ruined my reputation, made me look weak, all because he decided some traumatized photographer was worth going to war over. So yes, Lena, I want you gone. Want him to feel the loss of you the way I felt the loss of everything I built. Lena's mind raced. Adrian had security everywhere, cameras, tracking. Dominic would have known if something happened to him. Unless... You don't believe me, Marchetti observed. Smart. I wouldn't believe me either. Let me send you proof. Lena's phone buzzed with an incoming photo. She opened it with shaking hands and immediately wished she hadn't. Adrian tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. Blood on his face, his shirt torn. His eyes were defiant even through obvious pain, but he was definitely captured, definitely hurt. The second photo showed a wider angle, 5 armed men surrounding him, Marchetti himself standing just out of frame. Believe me now? Marchetti asked. 6 hours, Lena. The clock starts now. And don't try calling for help. I have people watching Dominic, watching Adrian's key lieutenants. Anyone mobilizes, anyone tries a rescue, and I put a bullet in your lover's head immediately. This stays between you and me. He hung up. Lena stood frozen, phone clutched in her hand, photos burning behind her eyes. Adrian was captured, hurt, being held by a man who'd already proven he was willing to kill to make a point. And she had 6 hours to decide between saving his life or destroying his heart. Her first instinct was to call Dominic anyway, rescue mission be damned. But Marchetti had been thorough. If he really was watching Adrian's people, any mobilization would get Adrian killed before help arrived. Her second instinct was to run, to give Marchetti what he wanted and pray he kept his word about releasing Adrian. But she'd learned enough about this world to know that promises from desperate men were worthless. Marchetti would kill Adrian anyway, either to eliminate the threat or just for revenge, which left option 3, the one that made Lena's hand shake and her heart race but felt like the only real choice available. She had to save Adrian herself. Lena looked at the photos again, studying the background details. Warehouse, old brick, broken windows letting in natural light. The angle of the shadows suggested morning sun, which meant east-facing, and behind Marchetti in the wider shot, partially visible through a doorway. A street sign she could just barely make out. She grabbed her laptop and pulled up the city map. Zooming in on the warehouse district Adrian's files had flagged as Marchetti territory, cross-referenced with east-facing buildings near that street intersection. There. One location fit all the markers. Lena changed into dark clothes, pulled her hair back, tried to think like Adrian would think. Marchetti expected her to either run or call for help. He wouldn't expect her to come alone, to walk into his trap deliberately, which made it the only approach that might work. She left the penthouse via the service elevator, the one Adrian probably didn't know she knew about, the one the building staff used. Grabbed a cab 6 blocks away to avoid penthouse security cameras. Gave the driver an address 3 streets from her actual destination. The warehouse district was exactly as grim as expected. Abandoned buildings, broken concrete, the kind of area where people disappeared and no one asked questions. Lena approached Marchetti's location from the back, using her photography training to stay in shadows, to move quietly. The warehouse had 2 guards outside, armed, alert, scanning the street. Lena couldn't fight them, couldn't overpower them, but she could be smart. She walked out into the open, hands raised, and called out, "I'm Lena Cruz, Marchetti's expecting me." The guards tensed, weapons raised. One spoke into a radio while the other kept his gun trained on her. "She says she's the Cruz woman," the first guard reported. "Yeah, alone, no visible weapons." Pause. "Understood." He lowered his radio. "Boss says to bring you in. Hands stay up, move slow. Move." They searched her roughly, efficiently, found nothing because she'd brought nothing. Then they walked her inside, through corridors that smelled like rust and decay, into the main warehouse space where Adrian was exactly where the photos showed, tied to a chair, blood on his face, surrounded by Marchetti's men. His eyes widened when he saw her, then filled with fury and fear. "Lena, what the hell are you doing here?" His voice was rough, strained. "You were supposed to run." "Quiet," one of Marchetti's men said, hitting Adrian hard enough to snap his head to the side. Lena flinched but kept moving forward, kept her focus on Marchetti, who was watching this reunion with obvious satisfaction. "Miss Cruz, you're early. I gave you 6 hours." "I don't need 6 hours. You want me gone? I'll go. Right now. But first you let Adrian go. That was the deal." "Was it?" Marchetti smiled. "I believe I said I'd let him live. I didn't say anything about letting him go." Adrian made a sound of rage, struggling against his restraints. "You son of a—" Another hit, harder this time. Lena watched blood drip from Adrian's split lip and felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear anymore. Something colder. "Here's the new deal," Marchetti continued. "You leave, like we agreed, and I keep Adrian alive, tied up right here, unable to stop you from walking away. In, say, 12 hours, after you've had time to truly disappear, I'll release him. He'll live, you'll be gone, and I'll have taken something precious from the great Adrian Virelli. You'll kill him the moment I leave. Maybe, maybe not. But you don't have much choice, do you?" Marchetti gestured to his men, to their weapons, to Adrian bleeding in his chair. "You're one woman with no training, no weapons, no backup. This isn't a movie, Lena. You can't save him. The best you can do is leave and hope I'm feeling merciful." Lena looked at Adrian. His eyes were desperate, pleading with her to run, to save herself, to let him sacrifice himself for her the way he'd been trying to do since the moment they met. "I love you," she said to him clearly. "I need you to know that. I love you, and I'm so sorry." Adrian's expression crumbled. "Lena, please." "Sorry for what?" Marchetti asked, amused. "For this." Lena pulled the phone from her pocket, the one they'd searched and found harmless, and hit the button she'd pre-programmed before leaving the penthouse. The one connected to the emergency alert Adrian had set up weeks ago. The one that would immediately notify Dominic and every single one of Adrian's people about an active threat. The one that had been transmitting her location via GPS since the moment she'd entered the warehouse. "You stupid girl," Marchetti started, reaching for his gun, but he was too late. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Windows shattered as smoke grenades crashed through. And then Dominic was there, massive, furious, unstoppable, with what looked like an army behind him. The fight was brutal and quick. Marchetti's men were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing people who'd trained for exactly this scenario. Lena dropped to the floor as bullets flew, covered her head, and prayed that Adrian's people were as good as he'd always claimed. When the shooting stopped, Lena looked up to see Marchetti on his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back, Dominic's gun to his head. Adrian was free from his chair, his restraints cut, being checked over by his men. "Lena!" Adrian's voice cut through the chaos. He shoved away the medic trying to tend his wounds and pulled her up from the floor, hands running over her face, her arms, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "I'm fine, I'm okay." She was shaking now, adrenaline crashing. "I called Dominic, I tracked the location. You walked into a warehouse full of armed men." Adrian's voice cracked between fury and fear. "You could have been killed, Lena. They could have shot you the second you walked in, but they didn't. I saved you." She grabbed his bloody shirt. "You were going to let him kill you. We're going to sacrifice yourself so I could run. So I did what you would have done. I found another option." Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then he kissed her hard, desperate, tasting like blood and relief and love that was too big for words. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "Don't ever do that again. Don't get kidnapped again, and I won't have to." Dominic approached, dragging Marchetti by the zip ties. "What do you want me to do with this one, boss?" Adrian looked at Marchetti with cold eyes. "What's the penalty for kidnapping and attempted murder in this state?" "Life, probably. If the DA can make the charges stick." "Then make them stick. Anonymously tip every law enforcement agency you can think of. Give them evidence, testimony, everything. I want Marchetti in a federal prison where he can't touch us again, and I want him alive to think about what happens when you threaten mine." It was a measured response. Strategic. Not the violence Marchetti probably expected, but something colder. A life sentence watching his empire get absorbed by the man who'd beaten him. "You could kill me," Marchetti spat. "Would be cleaner." "Probably, but I'm not doing this for clean. I'm doing it for her." Adrian pulled Lena closer. "She doesn't want bodies on her conscience, so you get to live. Lucky you." Dominic hauled Marchetti away. The warehouse emptied gradually. Adrian's people securing the scene, removing evidence, making everything disappear like it had never happened. By the time the last man left, it was just Lena and Adrian standing in an empty warehouse full of bullet holes and blood. "I thought I lost you," Adrian said quietly. "When I woke up in that chair when I realized Marchetti had gotten to me, my first thought was that you'd blame yourself, that you'd do something brave and stupid to try to fix it. Was I right?" "You were right." Lena looked at him, at his bloody face, his torn clothes, his eyes that held too much love and fear. "I couldn't let him win, Adrian. Couldn't let him take you from me just to prove a point. So I did the brave, stupid thing. You could have died. So could you. But we're both here, both alive, both together." She touched his face gently, avoiding the worst of the bruises. "That's what matters." Adrian pulled her against his chest, and Lena felt him shake, just once, just briefly, the control cracking to show the fear underneath. "I can't do this," he said into her hair. "Can't keep putting you in danger. Can't keep watching you walk into warehouses full of armed men because I couldn't protect myself. Lena, Stop." She pulled back to look at him directly. "You're about to say something noble and self-sacrificing about how I should leave for my own safety. Don't. I made my choice, Adrian. I chose you, chose this life, chose to fight for us instead of running from danger. You don't get to take that choice away from me now. Even if it means more days like this? More threats, more violence, more moments where we might lose each other? Even then." Lena took his hand, brought it to her lips, kissed his bloody knuckles. "I love you, all of you, the empire, the danger, the complicated mess of your world. And I'm not leaving. Not for Marchetti. Not for the next threat. Not ever. So you need to accept that I'm staying and figure out how we survive this together." Adrian looked at her like she was something precious and terrifying. Then he smiled, tired, bloody, but real. "Together," he repeated. "I can work with that." They left the warehouse as sirens began wailing in the distance, Dominic's anonymous tips already bearing fruit. By the time police arrived, the building would be empty except for evidence pointing directly at Marchetti's involvement in enough crimes to put him away for life. In the car back to the penthouse, Lena leaned against Adrian's shoulder and tried not to think about how close they'd come to losing everything. Tried not to replay the moment she'd seen him tied up, bleeding, surrounded by men who wanted him dead. What happens now? She asked. Now I dismantle what's left of Marchetti's operation. Absorb his territory, redirect his resources. Make sure his people understand that working for me is their only option. Adrian's voice was tired but determined. And then, he looked at her, something shifting in his expression. And then I marry you if you'll have me. Lena's breath caught. Adrian, I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a few months, but I also know I don't want to waste time pretending this is casual or temporary. You walked into a warehouse to save my life, Lena. You chose me over safety, over peace, over every rational reason to run. The least I can do is choose you back. Officially, permanently. Is this a proposal? It's a warning. I'm going to propose soon, properly, with a ring and everything. Just wanted to give you time to prepare your answer. He smiled despite the blood and bruises. Or to run, if that's what you want. Lena kissed him instead of answering. Let her lips say what words couldn't. Yes, always yes, in every version of their future she could imagine. When they finally made it back to the penthouse, Dominic was waiting with a medic who patched Adrian up while Lena watched, cataloging every injury, every wound that proved how close she'd come to losing him. You're both insane, Dominic commented, watching them. You know that, right? Walking into enemy territory alone, trusting a tracking signal to save you, that's not strategy, that's faith. Sometimes faith is all you have, Lena said. Yeah, well, lucky for you both, it worked. Dominic stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed. Boss is different with you, better, more human. After he left, Lena and Adrian lay tangled together on the couch, too wired to sleep despite the exhaustion. The city outside their windows looked peaceful, ignorant of the violence that had just reshaped its underground. I'm going to start pulling back from the worst of it, Adrian said quietly. The violence, the territory wars, the constant fighting. I'll keep the legitimate businesses, keep enough of the empire to maintain power and protection. But I'm done being the kind of man who gets kidnapped in warehouses, done putting you through days like today. You don't have to change for me. I'm not. I'm changing for us. For the future I want with you. He kissed her temple. You make me want to be better, Lena. Want to build something that won't get us both killed before we're 40. Lena thought about that, about a future where they could breathe without checking for threats, where Adrian's empire became something they could sustain instead of something that consumed them. Okay, she said, let's build it together. And there in Adrian's penthouse, wrapped in each other's arms and still wearing the day's blood and fear, they started planning a life that looked nothing like survival and everything like choice. The proposal came 6 weeks later, not in some grand restaurant or public spectacle, but in Lena's studio at 2 a.m. when neither of them could sleep. She'd been editing photos from a series she was calling Aftermath, images of the city rebuilding after violence, of spaces reclaiming themselves from darkness. Adrian had been reviewing contracts for legitimate business acquisitions, the kind that would slowly replace the empire's criminal foundations with something legal. Marry me, he said, not looking up from his paperwork. Lena's hand stilled on her keyboard. What? Marry me. I know I said I'd do this properly with a ring and everything, but I'm sitting here watching you work on something beautiful while I try to build us a future that won't get us killed, and I can't wait anymore. Adrian finally looked at her, and his eyes held that vulnerability she'd only seen a handful of times. Marry me, Lena. Let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. She should have asked for time to think. Should have pointed out that they'd only been together for months, that marriage was a huge step, that combining their lives officially would make her an even bigger target. All the rational objections lined up in her head, ready to be voiced. Instead, she said, yes. Adrian blinked. Yes? Yes. I'll marry you. No ring required, no grand gesture needed, just us, choosing each other again. Lena crossed to him, straddled his lap in the studio chair, and kissed him until they both forgot about work entirely. When she pulled back, she was grinning. Though I wouldn't say no to a ring eventually, something simple, nothing that screams, crime lord's wife. How about businessman's wife? I'm working on the transition. How's that going? Adrian's expression turned rueful. Slower than I'd like. Turns out dismantling a criminal empire while maintaining enough power to keep us safe is complicated. Dominic thinks I'm being too cautious. My accountant thinks I'm being reckless. And I'm just trying to find a middle ground where we can sleep at night without checking for threats. Lena understood the weight he was carrying. In the weeks since Marchetti's arrest, Adrian had been systematically restructuring his operations, selling off the illegal ventures to rivals who'd agreed to stay out of his territory, investing heavily in legitimate businesses, renegotiating relationships with people who'd only known him as a criminal. It was exhausting work, made harder by the fact that some of his own people didn't understand why he was changing. "You'll figure it out," she said. We'll figure it out together. Together. I like the sound of that. Adrian's hand settled on her hips, holding her close. "Fair warning. Being engaged to me comes with complications. Security will get tighter, my family will want to meet you, and every society page in the city will start speculating about who you are and why I'm marrying you." "Your family? You have family?" Lena realized she'd never asked. Had assumed Adrian was as alone as she was. "A sister, Maya. She's a doctor in Seattle, deliberately stayed far away from my world. Smart woman." Adrian smiled fondly. "I haven't told her about you yet. Wasn't sure how to explain that I fell in love with my assistant, who saved my life by walking into a warehouse full of armed men." "Maybe leave that part out. Probably wise." He pulled out his phone. "I should call her. She's going to be insufferable about this. She's been telling me for years that I needed someone to make me human again." Adrian made the call right there, with Lena still in his lap, and she listened to him talk to his sister with a warmth she'd never heard in his voice before. Maya was apparently thrilled, demanding to meet Lena immediately, asking 1,000 questions about how they met that Adrian deflected with practiced ease. "He's not telling me something," Maya said loudly enough for Lena to hear. "Adrian, what are you hiding?" "Nothing. Lena works for me, we fell in love, now we're getting married. Simple story." "You've never had a simple day in your life. Put her on the phone." Adrian handed Lena the phone with an apologetic look. She took it nervously. "Hi, Maya. I'm Lena." "Hi, Lena, who's apparently brave enough to marry my brother. First question, does he still do that thing where he works 18-hour days and forgets to eat?" "Yes, I've started keeping protein bars in his office." "Good. Second question, are you scared of him?" Lena glanced at Adrian, who was watching her with curious eyes. "No, I'm scared for him sometimes, but not of him. He's good to me, better than I probably deserve." "Wrong answer. You deserve everything. Anyone who can make Adrian sound this human definitely deserves everything." Maya's voice softened. "Take care of him, okay? He acts like he's invincible, but he's not. He's just stubborn and protective and terrible at asking for help. I've noticed. I like you already. When's the wedding? I need time to take off work." They talked for another 20 minutes, Maya extracting promises that they'd visit Seattle soon, that Lena would send photos, that Adrian would actually take time off for a honeymoon. By the time they hung up, Lena felt like she'd gained not just a future husband, but a family she'd been missing since her parents died. "She likes you," Adrian observed. "How can you tell?" "She didn't threaten you once. When I introduced her to my last girlfriend, years ago, she spent the entire call asking about escape routes and witness protection." He pulled Lena closer. "Maya's protective. If she thinks you're good for me, that means something." The wedding planning happened faster than Lena expected. Adrian wanted something private, intimate, just close friends and Maya. Lena agreed. She had no family to invite, and the thought of a big public wedding made her anxious. They settled on a small ceremony at the penthouse in 6 weeks, officiated by a judge Adrian knew who owed him favors. "I need to tell you something," Lena said one night, while they were supposedly looking at flower arrangements, but mostly just drinking wine and laughing at the ridiculousness of planning a wedding. "About Marcus." Adrian's expression shifted immediately. "What about him?" "He called me. Yesterday. From Nevada." She watched Adrian's jaw tighten. "Don't freak out. It wasn't threatening. He was apologizing. Said he's been in therapy, working through his issues, trying to become a better person. He wanted me to know he was sorry for what he did, that he understood why I left." "And you believe him?" "I don't know, maybe." "He sounded different, genuine." Lena set down her wine glass. "But I also know that abusers say whatever they need to say to get back in your head. So I told him I accepted his apology, but I never wanted to hear from him again. Then I blocked the number." "Good." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Do you need me to handle it? Make sure he stays in Nevada permanently?" "No. I think I think he actually might be trying to change, and even if he's not my problem anymore. You made sure of that. She took Adrian's hand. I told you about the call because we're getting married, and married people don't keep secrets, but I don't need you to fix this one. I handled it myself. Pride flickered across Adrian's face. You're getting stronger, more confident. I had a good teacher. Lena kissed him softly. You showed me I was worth fighting for, made me believe I could be brave. Now I'm trying to be the person you see when you look at me. You already are that person, Lena. You always were. I just gave you space to remember it. The weeks leading up to the wedding were surprisingly peaceful. Marchetti was officially indicted on 14 counts of racketeering, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Adrian's transition to legitimate business was progressing, slowly, but progressing. Lena's photography series was getting attention from galleries who wanted to show her work. Life felt almost normal, which is when Lena should have known something would go wrong. It happened 3 days before the wedding. Lena was at a gallery meeting, discussing her upcoming show, when Dominic called with tension in his voice that immediately put her on alert. Where are you? Gallery on 5th. Why? Stay there. I'm sending a car. Dominic's voice was clipped, professional. Don't leave the building until my driver arrives. Don't talk to anyone you don't know. Just wait. Dom, what's going on? Adrian will explain when you get here. Just be careful, Lena. He hung up before she could ask more questions. Lena excused herself from the meeting, heart hammering, and waited by the gallery entrance. Dominic's driver arrived in under 10 minutes, a man named Torres who worked Adrian's personal security. He didn't speak during the drive, just kept checking mirrors like he expected to be followed. They didn't go to this penthouse. Instead, Torres drove to one of Adrian's legitimate office buildings and took her up to a conference room where Adrian, Dominic, and 3 other serious-looking men were gathered around a laptop. What happened? Lena asked immediately. Adrian pulled her close, his embrace tight enough to be uncomfortable. We have a problem. Sit down. Lena sat. Adrian stayed standing behind her chair, hands on her shoulders like he needed the contact to stay grounded. Dominic turned the laptop so she could see the screen. Security footage, grainy but clear enough, showing a man she didn't recognize approaching her apartment building. He was stopped by security, turned away. The timestamp showed earlier that morning. Who is he? His name is Viktor Sokolov, one of the other men said, Adrian's tech specialist, if Lena remembered correctly. He's an enforcer for the Volkov family out of New York, and he's been in the city for 3 days asking questions about you, about Adrian, about the wedding. Ice flooded Lena's veins. The Volkov family? Russian organized crime. Major players on the East Coast. Adrian's hands tightened on her shoulders. I had dealings with them years ago, before you. Business that ended badly. They've been looking for leverage against me ever since. And they found it, Lena said quietly. They found me. They think they found you, but Victor doesn't know where you actually are. The apartment you were living in before moving to the penthouse is empty. Your studio is under a different name, and we've kept our relationship as private as possible. Dominic closed the laptop. Right now they're fishing, trying to confirm whether you're important enough to Adrian to be worth targeting. Lena's mind raced. So what do we do? Cancel the wedding? Go into hiding? No. Adrian's voice was hard, determined. No more hiding, no more letting enemies dictate our lives. We're getting married in 3 days like we planned, but we're doing it with security that makes the Pentagon look casual. Over the next hour, Adrian's team laid out a security plan that was both impressive and terrifying. The penthouse would be locked down, access restricted to verified guests only. Additional security would be stationed at every entrance on every floor, monitoring every camera. Dominic would personally oversee the operation, with backup teams ready to deploy at the first sign of trouble. This is insane, Lena said when they finally had a moment alone. We're planning our wedding like it's a military operation. Welcome to my world. Adrian's attempt at humor fell flat. Lena, I can't promise you a normal life. Can't promise there won't be more threats, more people trying to use you against me. But I can promise I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. I know. She leaned into him, exhausted. I thought after Marchetti, after you started transitioning to legitimate business, things would calm down, that we'd get a break from the constant danger. They will calm down, eventually, But the transition is going to take time, and until then, people like the Volkovs see vulnerability, see me changing as weakness rather than strength. Adrian tilted her chin up. If you want to postpone the wedding until this is handled— No, absolutely not. Lena's voice was fierce. I'm not letting some Russian enforcer dictate when I marry you. We do this on our schedule, not theirs. Adrian smiled, one of those real smiles that transformed his whole face. Have I mentioned that I love you? Once or twice, but I don't mind hearing it again. The next 3 days were a blur of final preparations mixed with security briefings. Maya arrived from Seattle, took one look at the security setup, and immediately cornered Adrian. This is your life now, Lena heard her ask through Adrian's office door. Armed guards and threat assessments at your wedding? It's temporary. I'm working on transitioning to— To what? Normal? Adrian, you've been living this way for 15 years. You've built an empire on violence and control. You really think you can just walk away from all that? I'm not walking away. I'm transforming it into something sustainable, something that won't get me or Lena killed before we're 40. Adrian's voice was strained. Maya, I know you don't understand this world. You're right, I don't. But I understand you, and I know you well enough to see that you're terrified. Not of the Volkovs or Victor or any external threat. You're terrified that you can't protect her, that your world is going to destroy the best thing that's ever happened to you. Silence. Then Adrian, quieter. Yeah, I am. Lena moved away from the door before they could catch her eavesdropping. Maya was right. Adrian was carrying fear he wouldn't admit to her directly, trying to be strong when inside he was probably falling apart. She found him later that night in his office, staring at security feeds with exhausted eyes. Come to bed, she said softly. In a minute. Just want to check. Adrian? Lena took the tablet from his hands and set it down. The security team is watching. Dominic is watching. You have literally 30 people making sure nothing goes wrong tomorrow. You don't have to do this alone. I need to. You need to sleep, need to trust your people, need to accept that you've done everything possible and now we just have to have faith it's enough. She pulled him to his feet. Please, I can't marry you if you collapse from exhaustion halfway through the vows. Adrian let her lead him to bed, though Lena could feel the tension in his body. They lay tangled together in the dark, neither sleeping, both hyper-aware of the security outside and the threat hanging over their wedding day. I'm scared, Adrian admitted quietly. Not of getting hurt myself, but of something happening to you. Of being the reason you get hurt because people want to get to me through you. I know, but Adrian, I'm choosing this anyway. Choosing you, choosing this life, choosing to believe that love is worth the risk. Lena kissed his jaw. Tomorrow, we get married. We commit to each other officially, publicly, in a way that tells everyone, including the Volkovs, that we're a united front. That threatening one of us means dealing with both of us. That's not comforting. That's doubling the target. Or doubling the strength. She shifted so she could see his face in the dim light. You've been alone for so long, carrying everything yourself. Let me share that weight. Let me be your partner in all of this. The empire, the danger, the transformation into something better. We're stronger together than apart. Adrian pulled her closer. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, she said again, echoing words from weeks ago. He taught me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. They finally fell asleep sometime near dawn, wrapped around each other like if they held tight enough, nothing could tear them apart. The wedding day arrived with surprising calmness. Lena woke to find Adrian already up, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than most cars, looking out the penthouse windows at the city below. Second thoughts? She asked. Never. Just thinking about how different everything looks from up here. How much has changed since you walked into my office asking for a job? He turned to face her. You ready for this? To marry you? Absolutely. To do it surrounded by armed security while Russian mobsters potentially watch? Less thrilled about that part. Adrian laughed. Genuine, warm, the sound she'd worked so hard to coax out of him over these months. Fair enough. Come on. Maya's threatening to start without us if we don't hurry. The ceremony was small, intimate, perfect. Just Adrian's inner circle, Maya, and the judge who looked mildly uncomfortable officiating a wedding with so much visible security. Lena wore a simple white dress she'd found at a boutique downtown, Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed crime lord's bride, just elegant and clean and hers. Adrian's vows made her cry. They weren't flowery or poetic, that wasn't who he was, but they were honest and raw and full of promises about protection and partnership and building something better together. Lena's vows were shorter. I choose you, every day and every way, despite every reason to run. I choose you, Adrian Varelli, and I'm going to keep choosing you until we're old and gray and our biggest threat is who gets the remote. That's it? Adrian asked, smiling. That's everything. The kiss when the judge pronounced them married was soft and sweet and felt like a promise, like they'd made it through the worst and now only better things waited ahead. The reception was supposed to be quiet, just dinner with their small group, champagne, maybe dancing. It stayed that way for exactly 43 minutes. Then Dominic's radio crackled with urgent chatter. Security had spotted Viktor Sokolov 3 blocks away, heading toward their building with what looked like backup. Get everyone to the safe room, Dominic ordered immediately. Now. Adrian's penthouse had a reinforced safe room built into the structure, something Lena had thought was paranoid when she'd first learned about it. Now she was grateful as Dominic herded their wedding guests into the secure space while Adrian's security team mobilized. You should go with them, Adrian told Lena. Not a chance. We're partners, remember? I don't hide while you handle threats. She grabbed his hand. What's the plan? Adrian looked at her, his wife, dressed in white, refusing to be protected, standing beside him like she'd done since that day in the warehouse. Something fierce and proud crossed his face. The plan is we end this. Together. He turned to Dominic. Get Viktor on the phone. I want to talk to him before this escalates. Dominic made the call, and moments later Viktor Sokolov's voice came through on speaker. Varelli, heard congratulations are in order. Viktor, you've got 30 seconds to explain why you're approaching my building with armed men on my wedding day before I decide you're declaring war. Adrian's voice was cold, controlled. And trust me, you don't want that war. No war, just business. The Volkov family has a proposition for you. They could have called, emailed, sent a formal request through proper channels. Instead, they sent an enforcer to stalk my wife. That's not business, Viktor. That's a threat. A demonstration of reach, nothing personal. Viktor's tone was almost apologetic. Look, I'm just the messenger. The Volkovs want a meeting. They think there's opportunity for partnership now that you're transitioning to legitimate operations. They wanted to make sure they had your attention. They have it, but they also have my fury. You come near my wife again, near my home, near anything I consider mine, and I will personally ensure the Volkovs understand exactly what happens when you threaten an Adrian Varelli who's trying to be a better man. Adrian's voice dropped dangerously low. Because here's the thing, Viktor. I was pulling back from violence, from territory wars, from all the things that made me dangerous. But you just reminded me why people were afraid of me in the first place, why they should still be afraid. Silence on the other end. Then, message received, I'll relay your response to my employers. You do that. And Viktor, tell them if they want a meeting, they go through proper channels. They make an appointment like everyone else. They show respect instead of sending armed men to my wedding. Adrian's eyes found Lena's. Because I'm building something different now, something better. And I will destroy anyone who threatens that. Are we clear? Crystal. The call ended. Dominic confirmed that Viktor and his men were retreating, leaving the area entirely. The immediate threat was over. Adrian pulled Lena into his arms, and she felt him shaking slightly, adrenaline, fear, rage all mixing together. So much for a peaceful wedding day, she said. At least it's memorable. Adrian laughed shakily. I'm sorry, Lena. You deserved a perfect day, and instead, I got to watch my husband defend our life together with the kind of strength that reminded everyone why they shouldn't mess with us. That's pretty perfect in its own way. She kissed him softly. We're married, Adrian. Nothing else matters. They brought their guests out of the safe room, assured everyone the situation was handled, and tried to salvage what remained of their wedding reception. Maya pulled Lena aside while Adrian was coordinating with Dominic. Is it always like this? Maya asked. Sometimes. Less often now than before, but yeah, sometimes. Lena met Maya's concerned gaze. I know this isn't normal. I know most people don't have armed security at their wedding or safe rooms in their penthouse, But Adrian's worth it. This life we're building is worth it. He's lucky to have you, someone who sees past the empire to the man underneath. Maya squeezed her hand. Just promise me you'll both be careful, that you'll actually build that better life you keep talking about, because I can't lose my brother to this world, Lena. He's all the family I have. You have me now too, Lena said, and I promise, we're working on better, every day. The rest of the reception passed without incident. They ate, drank champagne, danced in Adrian's living room while Maya took photos on her phone, and Dominic pretended not to smile at how happy his boss looked. When their guests finally left and they were alone, Adrian and Lena stood by the penthouse windows looking out at the city lights. We're married, Lena said, still processing. We are. You're stuck with me now. Good. I choose stuck. She leaned into his embrace. What happens next? Next, we honeymoon. Dominic's handling operations for 2 weeks while we disappear somewhere tropical and try to remember what normal feels like. Adrian kissed the top of her head. And when we come back, we keep building. Keep transitioning the empire into something sustainable. Keep proving that we can have this love, partnership, a life worth living without the constant violence. Think it'll work? With you? I think anything's possible. They went to bed that night as husband and wife, the title still feeling new and strange and wonderful. And despite the threat from the Volkovs, despite the security outside their door, despite all the ways their world was dangerous, Lena felt hopeful. They'd survived Marcus, survived Marchetti, survived threats and violence and moments where everything almost fell apart, and they'd done it together. Whatever came next, they'd handle that together too. In the morning, they'd fly somewhere warm and peaceful. They'd spend 2 weeks remembering what it felt like to just be Adrian and Lena, not crime lord and traumatized photographer, not targets and protectors, just two people who'd chosen each other against all rational judgment and somehow made it work. But for now, wrapped in each other's arms in the penthouse that had become their fortress and their home, they let themselves believe in the future they were building. A future built on choice instead of fear, on strength instead of violence, on love that was messy and complicated and absolutely worth every risk. The honeymoon in Costa Rica gave them 2 weeks of pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. They stayed in a private villa on the coast where the biggest threat was sunburn, and the most difficult decision was whether to have coffee on the beach or the terrace. Adrian laughed more in those 2 weeks than Lena had heard in all the months before. She took hundreds of photos of him swimming, cooking terrible breakfasts, sleeping in the hammock with a book on his chest, documenting a version of Adrian Varelli that no one else got to see. You're going to run out of memory on that camera, he said one afternoon, catching her photographing him yet again. Never. I need evidence that you know how to relax. Your sister won't believe me otherwise. Lena lowered the camera. Besides, I like capturing the real you, not the boss, not the strategist, just Adrian. The real me is kind of boring without the empire. You're wrong. The real you is the man who remembers how I take my coffee, who reads terrible detective novels, who talks to his sister every Sunday no matter what. That's not boring. That's human. They returned to the city refreshed but realistic. The empire hadn't disappeared in 2 weeks. The Volkovs hadn't forgotten about them. And Adrian's transition to legitimate business was still happening in slow, careful increments that tested his patience daily. The meeting with the Volkovs is scheduled for next week, Dominic informed them their first day back. They've agreed to neutral territory, limited security on both sides. They want to discuss potential partnerships in real estate and import operations. Legitimate partnerships? Lena asked. Mostly. The Volkovs are trying to clean up their operations too. Turns out we're not the only ones realizing that the old way of doing business has an expiration date. Dominic looked at Adrian. Question is whether you trust them enough to work together. Adrian considered this, his hand finding Lena's automatically. Set it up, but I want full background on everyone who will be in that room. And Lena comes with me. Adrian, Dominic started, she comes with me. We're partners now. The Volkovs need to understand that threatening her means threatening me, but also that we're a united front, not a weakness to exploit, a strength to respect. The meeting happened in a conference room at one of Adrian's legitimate office buildings. The Volkovs sent 3 representatives, Viktor Sokolov, who Lena recognized from the security footage, an older woman named Irina, who appeared to be the actual power, and a lawyer whose name Lena immediately forgot. Mrs. Virelli, Irina said, acknowledging Lena with a nod that felt almost respectful. Forgive Victor's enthusiasm at your wedding. He can be overzealous in his demonstrations of reach. He can be an idiot, Victor muttered, but there was no real heat in it. Lena stayed quiet, letting Adrian lead the conversation, but watching everything. The way Irina's eyes tracked movement, the way Victor deferred to her despite his size advantage, the way their lawyer took notes without ever looking up. These were serious people trying to build serious partnerships, not rivals looking for vulnerability. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, Adrian had tentatively agreed to a joint real estate venture. Legitimate properties, legal contracts, everything above board. It was a small step, but it represented something bigger. Former enemies choosing cooperation over conflict. That went better than expected, Lena said in the car afterward. Don't get comfortable. The Volkovs are still dangerous, still calculating. But Irina's smart enough to see that legitimate business has better long-term prospects than territory wars. Adrian pulled her close. And having you there helped. You being present, being obviously important to me. It changes the dynamic. Makes them see me as a man with something to lose, not just a target to exploit. Is that good? In this case? Yes. People are less likely to attack when they know the collateral damage includes someone you love. He kissed her temple. Welcome to being my most effective deterrent. Life settled into a new rhythm over the following months. Adrian continued dismantling the criminal parts of his empire while building legitimate alternatives. It was slow, frustrating work that required patience he didn't naturally possess. But Lena watched him adapt, watched him learn to build instead of destroy, and felt proud of the man he was becoming. Her photography career took off in ways she'd never imagined. The Aftermath series got picked up by a major gallery, leading to shows in 3 cities and interest from collectors who had no idea they were buying art from a crime lord's wife. Lena kept her married name off her professional work, partly for privacy, partly because she wanted her art to stand on its own merit. You're getting famous, Adrian observed one night, scrolling through reviews of her latest show. Critics are calling you a voice for forgotten spaces and chronicler of urban resilience. They're being generous. I just take pictures of things people usually ignore. You take pictures of truth. That's different. He set down his phone. I'm proud of you, you know. You could have let trauma define you forever. Instead, you turned it into art that helps other people see beauty in broken things. Lena curled into his side on the couch. I had help. Someone showed me I was worth saving. You saved yourself. I just gave you space to do it. The call from Maya came 9 months after the wedding. Adrian put it on speaker so Lena could hear. I'm pregnant, Maya announced without preamble. 12 weeks, due in March. And before you ask, yes, the father is involved. Yes, we're keeping it. No, I'm not getting married just because I'm pregnant. Questions? Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then, I'm going to be an uncle? Apparently. Try not to teach my kid how to run a criminal empire, okay? I'm out of that business. Mostly. Adrian's voice was warm, happy in a way Lena rarely heard. Maya, that's... Congratulations, really. I'm happy for you. After the call ended, Adrian sat quietly, processing. Lena watched emotions play across his face, joy, fear, something that looked like longing. You okay? She asked. Yeah, just thinking about family, about what that means now that Maya's having a baby. He turned to Lena. Have you thought about kids? I know we've never discussed it. I've thought about it. Wasn't sure you wanted them, given your world. My world is changing, becoming something kids could actually be part of without inheriting violence and danger. Adrian's hand found hers. I want that with you, Lena. Want to build a family, give our kids the stability neither of us had growing up. But only if you want it too. Lena thought about it. About tiny humans who'd have Adrian's dark eyes and her stubborn determination. About teaching them to be brave without being reckless, strong without being cruel. About building something that lasted beyond empires and art careers. I want it, she said. Maybe not immediately. Let's get through Maya's pregnancy first, make sure your transition is complete. But yes, I want to build a family with you. They started trying 6 months later, after Adrian had successfully sold off the last of his illegal operations and reinvested everything into legitimate ventures. It took 4 months of negative tests and growing frustration before Lena finally saw 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test in their penthouse bathroom. "Adrian!" Her voice came out shaky, overwhelmed. He appeared in the doorway immediately, gun drawn. Old habits died hard. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Look!" She held up the test with trembling hands. Adrian stared at it like he couldn't process what he was seeing. Then he swept her into his arms, lifting her off the floor, laughing with pure joy. "We're having a baby? We're having a baby. I'm going to be a dad." He set her down carefully, hands immediately going to her still flat stomach. "There's a person in there, a tiny person we made. That's generally how it works." Adrian kissed her until they were both breathless, his hands gentle on her face like she was something precious. "I love you, both of you. I'm going to be the best dad I can possibly be, Lena. Going to give our kid everything we didn't have: safety, stability, parents who actually stick around." The pregnancy was harder than Lena expected. Morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made her sleep 12 hours and still feel tired, emotional swings that left Adrian confused and trying desperately to help. But watching him transform into a father-to-be made every miserable moment worth it. He read parenting books obsessively, interviewed pediatricians like he was hiring for a corporate position, started renovating one of the penthouse bedrooms into a nursery with the same intensity he'd once applied to territory expansion. Dominic found the whole thing hilarious. "Boss is alphabetizing baby clothes," he reported to Lena one afternoon. "Color-coded the bottles. I think he's trying to organize an infant like it's a business operation." "Let him. It's how he processes fear." Lena shifted uncomfortably, 6 months pregnant and everything hurt. "He's terrified of being a bad father. He'll be great at it. Overprotective, probably neurotic, but great." Dominic's expression softened. "You're good for him, Lena." Made him remember there's more to life than control and power. Their daughter arrived 3 weeks early on a Tuesday morning, screaming her way into the world with impressive lung capacity. Adrian cried when they put her in his arms, actual tears running down his face as he stared at this tiny, perfect person they'd created. "She's so small," he whispered, terrified of holding her wrong. "She's perfect." Lena was exhausted, sore, and happier than she'd ever been. What should we name her? They'd debated names for months without agreement, but looking at their daughter's face, Adrian said, "Elena, after you, but spelled the traditional way so she has her own identity." "Elena Virelli." Lena tested the name. "I like it. Strong, classic. Like her mother." Elena became the center of their universe. Adrian scaled back his work schedule to be home more, delegating responsibilities he had never trusted anyone else with. Lena took photos constantly, documenting every tiny change, every milestone, creating a visual record of their daughter's life. Maya visited with her own baby, a son named James, and the cousins met for the first time in Adrian's living room, while the adults drank coffee and laughed about sleepless nights. "This is surreal," Maya said, watching Adrian expertly change Elena's diaper. "You, domestic, covered in spit-up and totally unbothered by it." "Turns out I'm good at things besides empire building." Adrian grinned at his daughter, who grabbed his finger with her tiny fist. "Who knew?" Lena knew. She saw the human underneath the crime lord. Maya's expression turned serious. "You're really out of it now? The dangerous stuff?" "Completely. Everything I run now is legal, documented, boring as hell by my old standards." Adrian looked at Lena. "Turns out, I'd rather build something my daughter can be proud of than maintain power through fear." The second pregnancy came 18 months later, unplanned but welcomed. Lena was photographing a gallery opening when the familiar nausea hit, and she knew immediately. Their son arrived right on schedule, healthy and loud, and immediately adored by his big sister. "2 kids?" Adrian said, looking slightly shell-shocked as he held their son while Elena climbed on the hospital bed. "We have 2 kids." "We do. Think we can handle it?" "Ask me in 18 years. They named him Marcus, not after Lena's ex, but after Adrian's father who died when Adrian was young. It felt right, reclaiming the name for something good instead of letting it represent pain. Life became beautifully chaotic. 2 kids under 3 meant constant noise endless laundry, sleep deprivation that made Lena's running from Marcus days look restful. But it also meant laughter, tiny arms around her neck, watching Adrian read bedtime stories in voices that made Elena giggle. "I want more," Adrian said one night after they'd finally gotten both kids to sleep. "More what? Coffee? Sleep? Sanity? Kids. I want more kids." He pulled her close. "I know it's crazy. We're already outnumbered. But I love this, Lena. Love our family. Want to fill this penthouse with as many tiny humans as we can handle." Lena thought about it. About more sleepless nights and chaos and expensive college funds. About more of those moments when Elena said, "I love you, Mama," unprompted. Or when Marcus's face lit up seeing his father come home. About building something that would outlast both of them. "2 more," she said. "But then we're done. 4 kids is my limit." They had twins the next time, girls who looked exactly alike and had personalities that were polar opposites. The penthouse got noisier, messier, filled with art projects and toys, and the kind of beautiful chaos that made Lena's old organized life seem like a distant dream. Adrian thrived as a father. He was patient with tantrums, creative with bedtime routines, fierce in his protection of their growing family. Watching him braid Elena's hair or teach Marcus to tie his shoes, Lena sometimes forgot he'd once been the man who'd made rivals disappear. "Do you miss it?" she asked one night after a particularly exhausting day of parenting 4 kids under 6. The empire, the power, the control. Adrian considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Problems had clear solutions. Remove the threat, protect the asset, maintain control. Parenting doesn't work that way. Can't intimidate a toddler into sleeping through the night or strategize your way through teenage emotions." "That's not an answer. The answer is no, I don't miss it. This..." He gestured around their chaotic living room, toys everywhere, one twin asleep on the couch while the other colored on the floor. "This is harder than anything I did before. More exhausting, more frustrating, more terrifying because I can't control everything. But it's also better, more real, more worth doing." The years passed in a blur of school plays and soccer games, birthday parties, and family vacations. Lena's photography career flourished, even as she balanced it with motherhood. She did a series on families that got national attention, intimate portraits of people choosing each other daily, building homes from love instead of fear. Adrian's legitimate empire grew into something genuinely impressive. Real estate development, import companies, venture capital, all legal, all profitable, all built on reputation instead of violence. He became someone the business community respected, someone who could take meetings without security, someone whose past became just that, the past. But not forgotten. Never forgotten. Elena was 12 when she asked about it directly. "Dad, someone at school said you used to be in the Mafia. Is that true?" Adrian looked at Lena across the dinner table. They'd known this conversation would come eventually, had prepared for it even as they hoped to delay it forever. "Can we talk in my office?" Adrian said to Elena. "This is important." Lena started to stand, but Adrian shook his head slightly. This needed to be between father and daughter first. They were in there for over an hour. When they emerged, Elena looked thoughtful, but not scared. She hugged her father tight, then went to her room without explanation. "What did you tell her?" Lena asked when they were alone. "The truth. That I used to run criminal operations. That I did things I'm not proud of. That I built power through fear and violence. But also that meeting you changed everything. That becoming a father made me want to be better. That the person I was isn't the person I am now." Adrian rubbed his face tiredly. "She asked if I ever killed anyone." "What did you say?" "I said that I've made choices I can't undo, but I've spent every day since trying to build something good enough to balance them out. And that I would never let that world touch her, or any of you." Elena came back downstairs an hour later and climbed into Adrian's lap. Too big for it, really, but neither of them cared. "I love you, Dad," she said simply. "I don't care what you used to be. I care about who you are now." Adrian held his daughter and cried quietly, years of fear and guilt and desperate hope finally releasing. Lena took a photo of them like that, not for her portfolio, just for them. Evidence that people could change, that love could transform even the hardest men into fathers who wept with relief when their children chose to see the best in them. The threat came when Lena least expected it. 14 years after the wedding, when their oldest was in high school and their youngest was in elementary school. A rival from Adrian's old life, recently released from prison, decided he had scores to settle. The first indication was a photo sent to Adrian's phone. Marcus, their son, leaving school with his friends, completely unaware he was being photographed. Adrian's response was immediate and terrifying in its controlled fury. He mobilized security that had gone mostly dormant, called in favors from people Lena thought he'd cut ties with years ago, became the man she'd first met in that office. Cold, precise, dangerous. "We're moving the kids," he told Lena. "All of them, tonight, to a secure location. You too." "Adrian, let's think about this." "I'm thinking about it. Someone threatened our son, photographed him without permission, sent it to me as a warning. That's not negotiable, Lena. The kids go somewhere safe until I handle this." "Handle it how?" But she already knew, could see it in his eyes. The violence he'd buried for 14 years was surfacing, sharpened by fatherhood into something more dangerous than it had ever been. They sent the kids to Maya's in Seattle with Dominic and a security team. Lena refused to go, refused to be separated from Adrian during this. "I stood by you through Marchetti, through the Volkovs, through everything. I'm not leaving now." "This is different. This involves our children." "Exactly. Which is why I'm staying. We're partners, Adrian. We handle threats together." The man who'd sent the photo made the mistake of calling Adrian directly. "Thought you went soft, Virelli. Thought you'd forgotten how to play the game." "I didn't forget anything. I just chose to build something better, but threaten my family." Adrian's voice dropped to that dangerous quiet Lena remembered from years ago. "And I'll remind you exactly why people used to be afraid of me." It was over in 48 hours. Adrian didn't tell Lena the details, but the man who'd threatened their son left the city permanently. His operation dismantled so thoroughly it was like he'd never existed. Adrian came home exhausted, haunted, looking like the man she'd first met, before love had softened the edges. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling Lena into his arms. "I tried to leave that life behind, tried to be better, but when someone threatens our kids, you protected them. That's what fathers do." Lena held him tight. "But Adrian, we need better security going forward. Can't keep living like we're invincible just because things have been quiet." They upgraded everything after that. Security at the kids' schools, tracking on their phones, protocols for emergencies. It felt excessive, paranoid, but it also felt necessary for children whose father had a past that occasionally reached forward. "Is this what their whole lives will be?" Lena asked one night, looking over their shoulders, wondering if Dad's old enemies will come back. "No, because eventually everyone from that life will be dead or too old to care. And our kids will be adults who can choose their own paths." Adrian's voice was firm. "I've built something legitimate for them, Lena. Something they can inherit without violence attached. This was the last ghost from my past. I'll make sure of it." And somehow, he did. The years continued passing peacefully. Elena went to college, studying social justice, wanting to help people the way her mother had been helped. Marcus became an artist, finding expression through sculpture. The twins went in completely different directions, one into medicine like Maya, the other into business like their father. Lena watched their children grow into good people, kind, brave, aware of their privilege but not defined by it. She'd been terrified that Adrian's past would poison their futures, but instead it had taught them empathy. They understood that people could change, that mistakes didn't define you forever, that choosing to be better was a daily commitment. Adrian aged well into the kind of man who commanded respect without fear. His business empire became something their children could be proud of. Charitable foundations, ethical development projects, investments in communities others ignored. He never fully escaped his past, but he built a future so bright it cast long shadows over what came before. On their 20th anniversary, they renewed their vows in the same penthouse where they'd first married. All 4 kids were there, plus Maya and her family. Dominic, who'd become Uncle Dom to their children, and a few close friends who'd watched them build this life from violence and trauma. 20 years ago, you asked me a question that changed everything, Lena said in her vows. You asked why I was working for you, and I told you the truth, that I was running, hiding, trying to disappear. And instead of using that weakness against me, you protected it, protected me, gave me space to become someone I'd forgotten I could be. She looked at their children, at the life they'd built. We've had hard days, dangerous days, Days when I wondered if loving you was the bravest or stupidest thing I'd ever done. But I would do it all again. Every threat, every fear, every moment of uncertainty, because they led us here. To this family, this life, this proof that people can change when they have something worth changing for. Adrian's vows were simpler. I was a hard man when you met me, built my life on control and power, and the kind of strength that destroys instead of builds. You could have left 100 times, should have probably, but you stayed. You saw something in me worth saving, and you refused to let me forget it existed. He touched her face gently. You made me a better man, Lena, not by trying to change me, but by loving me enough that I wanted to change myself. Wanted to be worthy of you, of our children, of the life we were building. And I've spent 20 years trying to deserve that gift. I'll spend the rest of my life continuing to try. Later, when their guests had gone and their children were asleep in various rooms around the penthouse, Adrian and Lena stood by the windows looking out at the city like they had so many times before. We made it, Lena said softly. We did, against odds that should have destroyed us. You know what the amazing part is? I don't regret any of it. Not the fear, not the danger, not the hard days. Because they made us who we are. Made this, she gestured at their home, their sleeping children, their shared life. Possible. Adrian pulled her close. When I first saw you in my office, all careful masks and organizational skills, I never imagined this. Never thought that broken man and traumatized woman could build something this good. We weren't broken. We were surviving. There's a difference. Lena had learned that over the years. Survival wasn't weakness. It was the kind of strength that didn't quit even when quitting seemed smarter. And we didn't just survive, Adrian. We lived, really lived. That's the victory. Their oldest daughter found them like that later, standing by the windows, holding each other, looking out at a city that had witnessed their transformation from violence to peace. You guys are disgustingly romantic, Elena said, but she was smiling. 20 years and you still look at each other like that. Like what? Lena asked. Like you'd burn the world down for each other, but also like you'd build it back up together afterward. Elena hugged them both. It's kind of inspiring, actually. Makes me think I can find something like this someday. You will, Adrian said. Just make sure he's worthy of you, and if he's not, you'll destroy him. I know, Dad. You've given that speech to all of us. Elena laughed. But seriously, thank you for showing us what love looks like when it's real, when it's hard but worth it. Not everyone gets to grow up seeing that. After Elena went back to bed, Lena and Adrian stayed by the windows until dawn, watching the city wake up. They'd built something extraordinary from the wreckage of their separate pasts, had taken trauma and violence and fear and transformed it into a family that knew how to choose love daily. Some people would say their story was too complicated to be romantic, that Adrian's past made him unsuitable, that Lena's trauma made her weak, that building love from such broken pieces was impossible. But those people didn't understand that the strongest foundations were built on truth, not perfection. That real love wasn't about finding someone without flaws. It was about choosing someone despite them, about building something better together than either could manage alone. Adrian Varelli had been a crime lord who'd made his name through violence and fear. Lena Cruz had been a woman running from a past that refused to let her go. Separately, they were damaged people trying to survive in a world that didn't forgive weakness. Together, they became proof that people could change, that love could transform even the hardest hearts, that choosing to build instead of destroy, to heal instead of hurt, to become better instead of staying broken. That was the real power. Their children would inherit wealth and opportunity, yes, but more importantly, they'd inherit the knowledge that transformation was possible, that their father's past didn't define their future, that their mother's trauma had become strength instead of limitation. And maybe, just maybe, they'd build their own lives on the foundation of that truth, that we are not our worst moments, our biggest mistakes, our deepest wounds. We are what we choose to become despite them. 20 years after a crime lord asked his new assistant a dangerous question, Adrian and Lena stood together watching sunrise over a city they'd both conquered in different ways. His empire had transformed into something their children could proudly inherit. Her photography had become a career that captured truth and beauty in forgotten spaces. Their family had become the kind of loud, chaotic, loving mess that neither of them had dared to dream possible. No regrets? Adrian asked softly. Lena thought about it. About Marcus and the years spent running, about Marchetti and warehouses full of armed men, about threats from rivals and fears for their children, about all the ways loving Adrian Varelli had complicated her life beyond recognition. Not a single one, she said. You? Never. You're the best decision I ever made. He kissed her as the sun broke fully over the horizon, painting their city in gold. The only decision that really mattered. And in that moment, standing in the penthouse they'd defended together, surrounded by evidence of the life they'd built. Toys scattered across expensive furniture, children sleeping peacefully in bedrooms that had never known fear, photos documenting 2 decades of choosing each other. Lena understood something fundamental. Love wasn't about finding perfect people in perfect circumstances. It was about finding someone worth fighting for and building something together that was stronger than the sum of your separate broken pieces. She and Adrian had done exactly that, had taken violence and trauma, fear and pain, and transformed it into something beautiful, something real, something that would outlast both of them in the children they'd raised and the choices those children would make. That was their legacy. Not the empire Adrian had built or the art Lena had created, but the proof that people could change when they had something worth changing for. And as morning light filled their home and their family slowly woke to another day of beautiful, chaotic normalcy, Lena knew that every risk had been worth it. Every dangerous choice, every moment of fear, every time she'd chosen to stay instead of run, all of it had led here. To a life built on love instead of fear. To a future brighter than either of their pasts. To proof that sometimes the most dangerous question leads to the most extraordinary answer.